see the agenda. We call the meeting to
Recording
order.
has begun.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Rob. It is 12:01. We call the meeting of October 31, 2022 to order of the Vermont Community Broadband Board. We have all board members in attendance. Christine, do you want to run down who is on for staff?
Yeah, we've got, I think we've got pretty much, let's see, we've got Rob's here, Kristen Bringus here, Alyssa is here, Adam is here, Stan is here. The only person we're missing right now is Lucy Rogers. Her cow had a baby, so she's quickly running back, take care of that, but she's going to be joining us after 12:30, and we'll introduce her then.
That's very cool. You gotta love Vermont and all that we do and different hobbies and activities we have. Okay, are there any changes to the agenda?
None from staff.
Right.
Other than we might have to kick the new staff introduction of Lucy down a bit until she shows
Okay.
up. But.
Okay. We'll take that as it comes. I'm going to move that we approve the agenda as posted. Is there a second? And seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Ayes carry unanimously.
Patty, can you hear me?
Is that Laura?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I'm having a hard time with my camera, so I wanted to make sure you could hear me.
Yeah, we got you. We can hear you. The audio cannot see you yet. Okay, first item on our agenda is approval of the October 17th board meeting minutes. I'm going to make a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
A second.
Dan seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, ayes carry. Minutes are approved. Next item we have on our agenda, let's skip the new staff intro and we'll move to CUD Finance Program and consideration of NEK broadband request.
Yep, I will turn this over to Rob to take the lead on.
Okay.
Sure. Welcome, everybody. Turn my camera on here. So at the last board meeting, the board voted to allow staff to release the RFP for the finance program. This is the 1.5 million in general funds that can be used by a CUD to help leverage additional funding. It's the first application did come in. The board did not give permission to staff to approve this first application because they wanted to see the one pager, which is in the packet. But our first application came in from NEK Broadband, and they have quite the innovative proposal to leverage those funds. And I'm just going to turn it right over to Krista to let her explain. You're up, Krista.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. I don't have a presentation for you today, so I'm just going to, identify what it is. So we are, as you know, putting in a $24 million application to USDA. We have decided to go for a quote unquote 100% grant, which means that we need a 25% non-federal match. So we went to VITA and to get a $5 million loan, realized that under USDA Reconnect rules, our match has to be spent first. It's not a spend 25 cents, get 75 cents. It's spend your money first and then you get the rest in grant funds. Which means that the original collateral that we negotiated with VITA is, doesn't come into play right away. So the $400,000 will be used as a debt service account, and then presumably it won't actually be needed. And then once sufficient collateral is in place and payments are being made, then the 400,000 also will get released, and the goal is to then recycle it again into a matching, a non-federal match purpose. In addition, the 400,000 enabled us to go for a $5 million loan, which enabled us to get a lower interest rate than we would have. And then lastly, yeah, I think those are my primary points. I thought I had one more point, but so that's the purpose of the funds. I will say that this is so $4 million of that $5 million from VITA is the broadband loan expansion program. These funds were originally created specifically to support VITA in putting out those broadband funds. And on Friday, not to be presumptuous, but on Friday, the loan was approved with the inclusion. Sorry, I'm just trying to get the language up. I'm going to get the official letter later today, but with the inclusion of the 400,000 debt service reserve. So that's what it is. Yeah, 400,000 debt service reserve account as part of the collateral. And so if you're doing the math, and Rick, that was the other point I was going to make, if you're doing the math and recognizing that we're still short on our roughly $6 million, the balance of that non-federal match is coming from the Community National Bank letter of credit that we have with them for the purchase of fiber. Any questions or information that you'd like?
Thank you, Krista. In the event, Krista, you didn't get the funds today, what would you do for your plan to move forward? Just curious if you have a plan B.
I mean, my plan B would be to start beating the bushes and see if the bank would do something, or see if, we could structure something differently with Community National Bank. That's what I would have gone and done. I'd be in a pickle because I'm submitting my thing tomorrow, and that's why, we'd sort of hope we wouldn't have to wait until the 31st, but we understand the decision that was made last time, so to wait until now.
And Christine, the funds that we're using as part of the 1.5 million that we were being allocated.
Yeah, that 1.5 million has been allocated to help leverage other funds for construction of networks. Rob, you want to add anything to that?
Sure. I just want to say this is pre-ARPA funds that were transferred over when the VCBB was created. So it's general funds that are specific for leveraging financing. Was connected with the broadband expansion loan program. So
Christine, if we have all the CUDs coming in, and I recognize that NEK is first, and that's great. Thank you, Krista, for being first up. But what are the plans for the other CUDs if they're all looking for 400,000? We won't have enough.
So it's first come, first serve. When this program was created, it was for enough of the CUDs that existed at that time. We have a few more now. We are talking to Northern Borders again at the end of this week to discuss the other grant program. That was the public-private partnership, the 1.2 million for other uses. And to discuss whether there's additional money from Northern Borders that's going to help round this out so it can be available to all CUDs. But it is on first come, first serve. It's what we have to work with.
Do you know, Rob and Christine, if there are others planning to come forward for an application?
At this point, we've only heard from NEK. We know in the past there had been interest from CV Fiber, but I don't know. We haven't heard anything else since we announced the program.
Okay. My biggest concern right now is that is that equity issue between all the CUDs, and if we're distributing the maximum right out of the gate to NEK, what do we do for everybody else coming in who asked for 400,000? At some point, we're going to run out. That's my only concern at this point. Completely support Krista's application conceptually. Just what do we do if we run out of funds here? That's my question.
Well, it's similar to a lot of grant programs. Once the funds are depleted, they're depleted, right? You set it up first come, first serve. Those, so yeah, if we gave $400,000 each, you could see that, after the third issuance, there'd only be 300,000 left. So it's, I'm not.
Okay, we don't have a plan for it then at this point.
We do not have a plan. This was our recommendation was the first come first serve program.
Okay, I'm going to go in order of the hands that were raised. I'm going to go Laura, Holly, Krista, then Brian. Laura?
Thanks, Patty. Christine, what did VCUDA say about this proposal?
I don't know. Rob, did you hear back from VCUDA?
Well, VCUDA is not in a role to evaluate the proposals from other CUDs. VCUDA knows and was aware of the program.
No, not about
What?
the NEK.
About the
I mean,
program.
about
in general?
Yeah, and how the funding, like the first come, first serve, that aspect of it.
I believe that's been the assumption from the beginning. We've been talking about this program since before the VCBB was created. It just hadn't seen the time to. We haven't had the time to launch it, and it didn't seem to be a priority with all the federal funds. But this is a use that the federal funds is not available. Can't use federal funds for what we're trying to do here when it comes to the financing.
And then you also had somebody that needed it.
Okay,
That's
so my question of, does VCUDA support this first come, first serve means of doing this? The answer to that is
They haven't taken a position. They haven't expressed any concern over this program.
okay. So have they been asked?
In the past, yes. I think the way it was formulated in legislation and how this is to leverage financing opportunities when they come across, there's really little way to do it that's not first come, first serve. There's no way to do this really as a purely competitive, since the timelines are all mixed. The timelines don't work. Not everybody's going to be pursuing a funding source at the same exact time.
So
It was presented to VCUDA, and
I'm sorry. Hold on, Krista. One second. Sorry. I know it's hard because I don't have my camera on. I apologize. And, I really would like us to be able to move forward with NEK's application today, but this is kind of going back to an issue that I've been raising, which is VCBB's role in terms of the CUDs and making sure that we are appropriately behind them. And so therefore, making sure that we are not creating situations, right? So it would never be a good situation for us to be going forward with something that the CUDs as a whole, kind of a policy that the CUDs as a whole are not kind of dialed in on. And, I don't think that means every single aspect of every single decision, but when we're talking about grant programs, it seems like, double checking that we're not
Is it by chance?
double checking.
Is Rob on the line? Maybe he could answer that right off for us.
Rob Vietscape, would you weigh in on this? Please?
Yeah, I honestly, this did not come up in discussions. We didn't explicitly get asked to discuss it, and we've only met once since the last time this group met. So
It did,
I would
however,
say this,
get raised with these terms. I mean, it was brought up by Rob in the VCUDA meeting, by Rob Fish in the VCUDA meeting as something that was going to be coming forward. And it was brought up as a first come, first serve piece. And there was no, pushback on that at the time. So while we may not have discussed it, we certainly had the opportunity to discuss it based on the terms that have been put forward.
Yeah, and I would just add that I know the group will want Krista to be successful, in her grant application and the things that she's got pressure on. So I'm sure they also will want opportunities to participate in these programs. So I don't think it's easy to give you a straight answer today about the feelings of VCUDA. But my gut reaction is people would not want to preclude NEK from a success with the programs it's applying for.
One other thing I think that might be helpful for the board is if we based it around the same formula we do the construction grant program, NEK would be getting $450,000 out of these funds based on their percentage of underserved road miles. So even if we use that as an equalizer in here, they would still be getting more than is actually allowed. The program tops out at 400,000. So.
For me, Rob, that is very helpful. I do recognize that NEK is the biggest CUD, so that little factoid is very helpful for me. I'm going to move to Holly and then Brian. Laura, are you done? I'm sorry.
I'm not actually.
Okay,
sorry.
So Laura still has the floor. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Just I also would like to see NEK, and I'm happy to hear Rob Vieske put that forward, that he knows that the CUDs would want NEK to be successful in this. But I want to stick a pin in this. This issue is not resolved for me going forward. The first come, first served. When we have grant programs, it is not, I don't want to see a flyby or we didn't get any pushback. Our role is support. And so I want it to be more than we didn't get any pushback. I am done now. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you, Laura. Holly, you're up.
It occurs to me to first say that we could have, where there's a first come, first serve, a notice policy. And if we had a policy to that effect, it could be, a notice policy to VCUDA or a public notice of grant applications in. There are ways to solve this problem of fairness. However, leave it to Krista Shute to find a way to put this Rube Goldberg arrangement of financing together. And this funding is what I think of as icing on the cake. The fact that we've found a way to apply these old grant monies in this new context is really special. And she and NEK are to be applauded for figuring out a way to do it. I have this question for you, Krista. What hurdles or contingencies do you have in order to use this funding? As in, what other yeses do you need to gather before you know you can use this money?
So I need the commitment of this money in order to file the USDA grant application, which will be, basically 17 million in grants to match the 6 million in, and that, yes, I'm not going to borrow the VITA funds if I don't, I mean, I may borrow the VITA funds at some point and I may still want to use them for this. But this current plan is based on getting a yes from Reconnect. And so that's the yes that creates that contingency. Now, like I said,
do you need the bank's yes also?
No, I already have the bank. I already have the signed letter of credit from Community National Bank, and I'm waiting. I mean, I can't, he's not going to send me the signed letter. VITA's not sending me the signed letter until they know that they have the 400,000 debt service, because I can't sign the letter back. So we're hoping that this all happens today so that he can send that signed letter to me and then I can sign it. And yeah, so I have what I need, except for hopefully the result of what this is. Yeah.
So my only concern in terms of fairness is not running a first come, first served arrangement here, because with this money, which we talked about long ago, this is like trying to find a special purpose that it can be used for, and somebody just has to figure it out. So it's more about who's got the initiative. But the fairness comes into play for me if we have other CUDs lining up and the funds are tied up in an uncommitted way while other organizations figure themselves out. So that's a long-winded way of saying, would staff, pardon me, would staff please ensure that there is a timeline in which the commitment of these funds has to be confirmed or they return to the kitty, so to speak, for reallocation? I mean, it just should be, I know since everything's on hyperspeed, need it today, it's unlikely that we're going to go 6 or 8 months without knowing whether or not the $400,000 is going to be recommitted, but it shouldn't be viewed as $400,000 that gets to sit on the ledger of NEK while they figure out another solution if they get a no. It should come back, and then the next person gets a shot at it, and that would solve to some degree the first come first serve issue that I think some of us are worried about. Does that make sense?
That's it. That's in the RFP. I have to figure out how many months it was, but there had to be a commitment or it would be returned. But we thought that because we were concerned about that too. We didn't want this just to be, here's $400,000, use it whenever you need to. It had to be about a specific effort.
I've got Patty's not here, so I'll go ahead.
No, I am, can you hear me?
Oh, you
I
are,
am
okay.
here.
Okay,
Chris
great.
has got a comment on that.
Okay, the camera dropped off. I am still here, but the camera, for whatever
Excellent.
reason, has dropped
I'll
off.
tell you who's got the hands up then. Can you see who's got the hands up?
I can see. We were up, Brian was next, and then Dan.
Alexa, 12 minutes.
Okay.
I took my hand down. My question was answered, Patty. I'm good.
Okay, Dan, you're up.
No, my question was answered as well with that last piece. If it's not getting used for the loan, it'll get returned.
Okay,
Sorry.
Krista, and Krista, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I would want in the grant contract to reserve the right to use it for the $5 million loan, even if I didn't get USDA. I would just have to be negotiating different terms with the VITA in order, in order to continue to get that loan. I mean, this is a match to the VITA loan, which under the original appropriation, it was to the Department of Public Service, $1.5 million to be awarded as grants to communications union districts. These grants shall be used to provide cash equity to secure loans to finance broadband projects, including the 10% of project costs required to secure financing through the Broadband Expansion Loan Program administered by the Vermont Economic Development Authority. A communications union district may not receive more than $400,000 in awards because the maximum broadband expansion loan program was $4 million. And the second point that I will make is that VITA has not received applications from other CUDs and is interested. And I told them that I would help them, through VCUDA and through, creating awareness of the process, get other CUDs interested. But in terms of letting you know what is currently out there and in terms of interest, that's my understanding from VITA's perspective.
Okay, Christine, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just want to make a point about why we strongly support this application. The USDA Reconnect hasn't provided a grant to Vermont in over 4 years, and NEK's been working with them closely, and they're pretty excited about this application. So it has a chance to really do some real good.
Okay, I'm going to put a motion on the table so we can take action that we move to approve the NEK grant application for $400,000 with a contingency that staff reach out to VCUDA and get an opinion from them on the allocation process. In terms of the fairness issue, if we were to allocate it based on the percentage of each CUD's position on road miles, that establishes a fairness piece. I'm concerned that we're going to get lined up a bunch of CUDs for $400,000 and we're going to quickly exhaust the fund, and someone's going to be saying, hey, this just because I got here 2 minutes later than somebody else doesn't seem appropriate. Christine, I'd like you to address this with VCUDA to figure out a plan, but I'm going to make a motion to approve the NEK grant application, just given their size allocation would have been larger than the 400,000. So I think it's appropriate to move forward. It's a long motion, but
I'll second it.
thank you, Laura. Any discussion?
Is there any chance we could get the CUDA response before we vote? Not today, of course, but like a quick turn that way.
They need the letter today.
They being NEK does.
So
I guess
Sorry.
you could ask the folks on the phone.
I have a suggestion, Patty. Sorry.
Go ahead, Laura.
I don't know if Rob Vitsky, I don't know how, right, so a number of the CUDs are on. I don't know if we could maybe move past this and come back to it, and the CUDs could maybe just have a moment to consult. That, I mean, I'm just looking for them to say, yes, we like this. I mean, if the CUDs are all fine with first come, first serve, then I'm fine. I'm looking for that consult.
Mm-hmm.
Let me try to do in the background, and if I could just take 1 second, I do believe that the CDs would be supportive of moving this one forward. Chris has been working on this grant for a long time, and so I will start an email thread. But if you don't hear back from me by the end of the meeting, we're good. Our voting members are not all here. All I can do is get an opinion of folks. We really need more time to actually know VCUDA's opinion, but I will try to get you an opinion by the end of the meeting, and I expect it'll be supportive of any case application.
Okay, I'm going to table this vote then until the end of the meeting to give Rob enough time to query some of the CUD members.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you all. So hold tight, Krista. We'll get back to you at the end of by the end of the meeting.
Okay, and I would just like to say, if I am not here at the end of the meeting, obviously, please proceed without me, and it's not a disrespect. I need to head up to the hospital, and I can't. I'll have to leave by 3. So.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Next on our agenda, Christine, is utility make ready.
Yes, I scheduled that for 1 o'clock. We have guests coming in, so with the pleasure of the board, I think we could move to simplified business model review. That's informational, and that should.
Okay. All right. Let's move to item 6, compliance review recommendation.
Okay. Stan, or no, I'm sorry, it's Kristen. Kristen Bringa's taking this one.
That's me. Let me just get my camera turned on here. Hello. All
Hello.
right. So I think most of you know me, but I'll give you a quick introduction for those on the call who may not have met me yet. So my name's Kristen Bringa, and I'm the PSD Contracts and Grants Administrator. I've been with them since December of 2021. Prior to that, I was with the Department of Financial Regulation for 10 years as an examiner in charge with the Captive Insurance Division, doing auditing and compliance work for the captive insurance companies over there. I'm also a Vermont licensed CPA. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give a high level review similar to what is in the memo that was also in your board packet of what my proposal is for regulatory compliance and governance review audits. This is something we haven't done before. PSD hasn't done before, so we're really starting from scratch here. Luckily, I do have a background in it, so it's not completely foreign to me, but it is going to be a little bit of a lift for all of us. So what I'm proposing is that for all of our high-risk grantees, which is basically all the communication union districts at this point, I believe, is that there will be a review done once they have significant grant funding in place. And by significant, I'm really leaning more towards like the construction grant side of things. If we have grantees, which we do have, that are in the lower moderate risk category, that's going to be at our discretion as to whether we feel that we need to go in there and look at things or not. And once we've done those initial reviews, I don't think, just given how new that these entities are for the communication union districts, I don't think that we necessarily need to do this on an annual basis. I think we can get away with doing it once and then going through an annual attestation process. and just having them telling us what has changed, what new processes are in place, and then I can take a look at changes rather than going through, the motions of this year after year. So, this is not going to be at a level of a financial audit. We just don't have the capacity for that, or really the statutory authority to even perform those. Luckily, in statute, we already have provisions for the communication union districts that once they're operational, they are required to have a third-party financial audit annually. So that is something that they're already required to do. And once they hit the $750,000 expenditure threshold for federal funding, they also have to have a single audit. And the single audit differs slightly from a standard financial audit. It's a little bit more comprehensive. It delves a little bit into like internal controls that are in place as it pertains to those grant awards. So, those are things that I will be looking at after the third-party auditors have come in, just to make sure that there's no issues that we need to be aware of, or corrective action plans that we need to, put in place. The types of things that we're probably going to be going in and looking at, and again, I still have to develop the full framework. This is really the high-level review. It's going to be a lot of kind of governance items, making sure that, board composition and competency, bylaws, meeting minutes, that sort of thing, just to make sure that we feel like that there's some, processes in place where, basically people are looking at the things that they need to look at and governing in the way that they need to be. There's also going to be a component of it where I will want to go in and look at cost allocation methodology, procurement policies, those type of things, just because that is outside of the scope of what the external auditors would be looking at. And that's something that from a grant monitoring point of view that we definitely need to be aware of and making sure that we're hitting on. So, internal control processes are going to be a big one. That's something that we definitely are going to have to take a look at. And I know in the past we've had discussions about how we monitor or ensure that proper, monitoring is going on at the CUD level for, external service providers and whatnot. And I think that that's going to come down to an internal control process review where we are going to want to go in and see how these grantees are monitoring those service providers. That's really kind of as much as we can do with the authority that we have. So that's really all I have at a high level. I'm happy to answer questions or concerns.
Thank you, Christine. I'm going to tee it up and then go to Laura and then Holly. My first question dealt with who actually, in your memo, it talks about high-risk folks. Any of the CUDs are considered high risk after going through this review process and the annual attestation. Who establishes the high risk? Is that established by VCBB or is that?
Yes. Yep, that's VCBB. I do the initial risk assessments. Every grantee prior to us awarding a grant has to go through a risk assessment process. There's a check sheet and memo and everything that we go through. Christine signs off on it after I've done that. And really, when I say high risk, it's really more to do with the fact that these entities are so new. In order to ensure that they've got proper procedures in place and accountability, when I score them, there's some scoring criteria, and a lot of what it is, obviously dollar threshold has to do with it. The higher the dollar threshold, the riskier they are. And that's just, across the board. Mm-hmm. But also just the fact that they, their boards have not been in place for a long time. They're still getting all their processes in place. That inherently makes them high risk. It's not that we found anything that's wrong with them. Mm-hmm. It's just that from an experience perspective, it's just, there's no background there.
Okay. Christine, the checklist and the scoring process, just to assure transparency to the CUDs, I just want to make sure that they're aware of what that checklist is and where is that published? Where can they see that and find that information?
Yeah, they actually get this list. So they all have this list.
Okay.
Yep, because that was part of process.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is a statewide state of Vermont process. It's not something that just the VCBB or the PSD has come up with. This is something that we are required to do by state of Vermont Finance and Management.
Okay, that's very helpful. And the last question I had before I'm going to turn to Laura for questions. Has this been run by the state auditor's office?
This has not. I don't think that this is really within their purview. This is really comes down to grant monitoring procedures. So every department does this a little bit different. There's some larger departments like the Agency of Transportation, Public Service Department, where they have enough grantees and enough money flowing through where they actually have full-on audit departments. Like they have staff that is all that they do is audit. So this is really us trying to get up to speed. You know, I don't think we need a full-on audit department because we just don't have enough grants that we need to look at, but we do have procedures that we need to do to ensure accountability.
Okay. All right, my questions are done. I'll turn now to Laura.
Thanks, Patty. Kristen, this is really helpful. And my question is, I have a couple of questions. My first question for you is just about the process. Did I hear you correctly say that the audit that you will be conducting will happen after a single audit?
It doesn't really, I mean, they can be simultaneous. It's not going to be necessarily because my audit or, you know, review procedures are more for governance or regulatory compliance purposes. It doesn't really have to line up with a particular year end. So it's not like I need to see, you know, the 2022 financial audit before I can go in and do what I need to do, because it doesn't, what I'm doing doesn't hinge on the on an actual like year end or anything like that.
Okay, I got it. That's really helpful. And I think that's my last question for you, Kristen. Christine, I have a question for you. So this is a very specific area that, you know, I would hope we were checking in with the CUDs to understand if there were a need for shared technical assistance or training, and if that's happened. Maybe that's already happened. I know this is something that I had talked with several of the CUDs and maybe even you, Christine, earlier. So can you tell me what, if anything, exists now or is planned for the future?
Yeah, we're actually doing some formal training on this, on the grant compliance. You know, our biggest concern is around grant compliance. But we work, you know, the audit is really an audit of, you know, I would say, you know, we audit the CUDs, but we're also auditing the VCBB, because this is all about getting the CUDs to the point where they're running in a way that they become low risk over time. So that low risk over time involves, as Kristen is focused on the governance policies, but at the same time, you know, that ties also to getting them to a solid financial performance and a solid business plan. So I would say that is our ongoing work.
So there's ongoing training, I guess, is
Yes.
what I'm asking. So, you know, I'm thinking also, I think the NEK had a CUD. Maybe it was in the Kingdom, a CUD academy of some sort or something like that.
We have that in the budget. That's planned again.
Okay, and so that, so just having worked for organizations that go through audits and knowing that our CUDs are largely volunteers, I just want to make sure that we are on top of the support that they will need to do, you know, this correctly, and it sounds like we are. So, great. That's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, Holly, you're up.
Oh, you're on mute.
You're muted, Holly.
We can't hear you, Holly.
That'll help. Thank you. My comments here are really, Kristen, not directed to you so much as thinking out loud with you. And I'm thrilled that you have this program begun, but I don't think it's necessarily enough. I live in a town that was given the local telecom providers, Topsham Telephone. They were given $1 million to string fiber in our community. They named 35 households that they would serve. and the Public Service Department does not know whether those 35 households have service. There's no obligation for them to share that fiber. It's not publicly available. And others who have tried to come in and help other households get service have been turned down. In other words, they won't even serve additional households. And there's no recourse. The department tells me there's no recourse except to send nasty grams to the grant recipient. That basically the compliance benchmarks were so low that they complied by spending the money. Okay. So and Brian, I see you smiling. So my comment about this is whether our regulatory review could include whether or not the CUDs have complied with their existing grant documents, with the benchmarks and the grants. It sounds to me like, Christine, you are incorporating some training on that, but I just don't know. We have not had any discussion about what the VCBB itself is doing in terms of grant compliance. But I was hopeful that Kristen's process could not just focus on governance. That's very self-reporting related, you know. I'm looking for application of some standard that would show us that the money is getting used for the right purposes and that it's consistent with the grant applications. And I don't hear that in this plan.
That's already happening. They submit monthly reports to us, and we look at it in comparison to what their grant agreements are showing. And when we go to grant closeout, that will also be happening, both from a financial perspective, and then as we get further along in the process, there will also have to be some accountability on the construction side, which is beyond my capabilities, but obviously that's going to have to have some additional partners.
Whose capability does that fall within?
It could be a contractor. It's going to have to be somebody who can go out and take a look at these, systems, who would actually know what they're looking at. I mean, I certainly can't do it.
Yeah, that's in our budget plan, by the way.
Yeah.
It is. Okay, that's great.
So, yeah. What I'm proposing is in addition to what is already happening with the
that's
monitoring.
Great. I thought that Patty's suggestion, actually, that you interface with the state auditor was an extremely good one. And just because you don't have to doesn't mean you shouldn't. So they have been asking for a lot of information from our CUDs. And I feel protective of those CUDs in this situation, but it would be wonderful if you would look at this as a seamless web and find out what they're checking for and how it is consistent with or different from what you're doing.
Yep. And I think it's a good recommendation. At the end of the day, that's a public service department decision as to what that involvement is. It's kind of outside of the scope of what VCBB can do. Just because I do sit on the PSD side, it's certainly something I can, bring to their attention, but it's beyond what I can do myself.
You just told me you don't work for us.
I don't.
Yeah, that's been made very clear. But let me just
trust
say,
me, I get reminded of that regularly too. So.
But Holly, let me add, if you don't mind, your suggestion is a good one in that, we as a staff have been responding to this statewide audit from the auditor's office. And I believe they're asking some very good questions, and I really appreciate the audit because and I think we should make sure we get that on the agenda for the board and share those questions with you and share the answers with you. But I think, I feel like
Christine, just to clarify, this is Stan. It's not an audit. They've just asked us for some information.
Yeah, thank you,
yes.
Stan.
Yep.
Thank you, Stan,
Stan
for
is
clarifying.
correct.
But the point of this whole discussion is the information requests I found very helpful, and I think it's coming at a very timely, good time in our, we got a good staff here now. I want to make sure we can fulfill all all the implications that those questions ask. So I think we should put that on the agenda for the next board meeting in terms of the type of questions, provide that. We have not answered them yet, but we are in the process of answering them now.
One
So
of the things
Christine-
that one of the things that I've asked for in the past that I still think would be, it's related to this, is to give the board members the form of grant award document that staff provides, because we have no visibility on what kind of ramifications and conditions are put into the grant document. And just from a fiduciary standpoint, I would feel whether or not people are complying with them is another level of question, but just to be aware that there are standards for recourse it would seem to me to be appropriate and related to this question.
Yep.
Sure.
And yep, and that's all within the grant agreements as well. So
We could do that. We can make that available. We will make that available.
Christine, this is Patty. Can you elaborate a little bit on when you say from the auditor's office, they've been asking you a bunch of questions and you've found it helpful? Are you making changes in terms of staff practice in response to those questions?
Well, right now we're responding to the questions, but yes, they should result in changes in staff practice and possibly changes in board practice. I think, we'll take a look when we come to the organizational meeting, and there's definitely questions being asked about how the VCB board operates as well.
Can you add to the parking lot an update on auditor questions? I would like that as a topic for us to talk about, what the auditors are asking and what is that translating into changes of practice at the staff level, and certainly how that would translate to any changes that the VCBB board has to take.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say there's necessarily changes that are being made in process, but we're viewing this as a chance for self-reflection. I think is the best way to put this, because we can always do better. That's just for anybody in state government.
Yeah,
exactly.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, good point.
But it's just helpful to know what that is, because it's right now just, it's a blank page, so to speak, in my head, and it would be nice to fill in some color on that blank page.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it'd be very helpful for the board to see this.
Christine, are you looking for an action on Christine's memo?
No action. We're not looking for it. It was to inform this discussion, which I think was effective.
Okay.
We can't vote on it. She doesn't work for us.
Yeah. There's no action required.
You can always
I get
order.
reminded of it regularly.
You could order your executive director.
This is also part of our fifth reminder to the CUDs that they need to do a single audit if they've received more than $750,000 in federal funds, and should do one anyway.
Yeah. Yep. Kristen, thank you very much for the update and the memo in the packet. We very much appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. That was good.
Laura, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just, I had a question before. I was listening to Christine and I thought she maybe answered my question, and then she was starting to make a statement there about we could always ask, our executive director to check in with the auditor. So that was my question before was, if we can't tell the PSD to check in with the auditor, we can ask our executive director, but I thought I heard you saying that you had, or you were. Is that the case, that you are checking in with them?
No, that's not what I said. So thanks for clarifying. We're in the middle of asking questions, but it's been a one-way street. But I think I will take that under advisement.
Yeah. So, again, in our role as supporting and facilitating support and correct technical assistance to the CUDs, I think that would be appropriate, if for you, Christine, our executive director of staff, to interface as much as possible to make sure that the CUDs, have the assistance they need to comply with the. So, okay.
Okay.
It's
Thank you.
also useful to note that our general counsel Stan has been in ongoing contact with the auditor's office as related to this. That's what everything's been going through Stan for consistency.
Yeah,
So-
but I will add, I think I'm taking, Laura, just to clarify, I think there's, the action item I take out of this is I think what we need to do is, and I'll present that back to the board, part of the parking lot response that Patty has asked for, is that, ultimately, here are the type of recommended actions from staff that we need to take as a result of the questions. And certainly following up with the auditor's office, to see what kind of changes we think we need to make and what kind of changes that, do they support those changes and do they have other recommendations?
So that sounds great to me. And Patty, with your indulgence, I have a 30-second comment, which is I would love to proceed more quickly through these things. And so, like, when I ask a question, if we could have a point person from staff, which I presume is Christine, answer the question. And it's either, we know, it's something we know or we don't know, whatever, but sometimes it feels like we're wandering through the questions and no, or we haven't done that, or we'll come back with that as a perfectly fine answer, but multiple answers ends up being confusing, I think, for all of us.
Okay, did I answer your question satisfactorily?
You did. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I am done. Thank you, Patty.
Okay, thank you, Laura. All right, any other questions, discussion on this item? Compliance review. Okay, let's move along to the next agenda item. Do we have time, 8 minutes to do workforce development?
No, but I think we could get the simplified modeling in that time.
All right, let's do number 8.
Yeah, this is, we developed this model working with Adam Bornstein. I want to, just put in a plug for Adam. He's been very creative and helpful for us. But I wanted to share this with the board and the CUDs. And I'm going to share my screen just to show you the simplified model. And, we'll certainly make it available to anybody who wants it. But develop this model as a result of meeting with Adam and, Adam asking the questions. So let me just share the screen. I'll quickly go through this. Okay, can you see this model? Really simple CUD business case analysis.
Has not come up yet for me. There it is.
Okay. So this model is really interesting because if you look in the middle here, monthly average revenue per customer acquired, we basically took the numbers, kind of an average of the numbers that have been coming out of the CUD business plans and plugged that into a formula. And this ARPU requirement is generally reflective of what it is from the CUDs. And you could change certain parts of this and see what the impact is. The whole impact here, if you look to the right on your screen, the impact of grants on ARPU, this was pretty dramatic. What resulted from this was...
Christine, for those that don't know what ARPU means, please spell out the acronym.
Yep, okay, thank you. ARPU is the average revenue requirement per paying customer. So basically, we talk about passings and take rate. What ultimately you're going to end up with a number of customers that are paying, and you need to get a certain dollar in order to maintain the business case that the CUDs have. And so, a large chunk of that ARPU is debt service. So if you take this, running just one example here is an impact of grants on ARPU, the amount of money required. This really gets to the affordability issue, by the way, because if you have to collect $91 per paying customer, it's going to be tough to create, no cost entry programs for those on the low income scale, considering we have a large percentage of low income folks. But if we can get the grant funding, if you look at this grant, I'm looking on the right side of the page. Here's what happens as you increase the grants. Once you get to 100% funded, the ARPU is down to $46. So that means you can offer, even a lower entry cost. So this model, shows the impact of changes. For example, if I change interest rate from 5% to 2%, which I'll do right now, you can see that takes it takes the ARPU from $91 to $79. So you can take this model and change assumptions, the payback period, and plug in different assumptions like take rates, for example. This is a take rate of 45%, which is about average for the CUDs. If I take that take rate and I drop it down to 30%, of course, the ARPU goes up to $113. So this model, we'll make it available. I encourage this, to do what if scenarios with this, but it certainly has. The main goal of this was to see what the impact of the grants were, but in developing the model, there's a lot that goes into that can be changed as well. But the real punchline of this presentation is to say, as we look at the impact of grants, it's significant. And yes, we can build business plans on 60% funding. However, if we can continue to aggressively go after grants and get it down as low as possible, it will reduce the average revenue requirement needed for each of the paying customers. So that's really the point I wanted to make with this. I'm open to questions.
Okay, Holly has her hand up. You're up first, Holly.
So Christine, this is super cool. I do have a couple questions. First question is whether this pre-construction cost and make-ready costs are actually significantly on target for all of our CUDs, or what's the range in the variables on that?
Well, that's why we have this make-ready discussion immediately following this agenda item. The make-ready, the pre-construction costs have been coming in pretty even. Make-ready has been all over the place, and that's why make-ready is an important part of this discussion.
Okay.
But yeah.
So could you take this model and plug in the actuals from the various CUDs so that we could show a dashboard report that has the variables and where they are against the ARPU requirement? Why wouldn't we do that so that we know where we're at against a standard?
That's a really excellent question. I would like to do that. I think the only concern I have is, we may have to do that under NDA. But yes, I think that's yes, we should do that. That's the answer to that.
Yeah, I want to point out, in the world of affordability, what you're doing there is bringing the cost, if at 100% funded, if you have a $30 ACP, until those funds run out, by the way, a $30 ACP subsidy, and the generalized contribution on the part of the customer can be $20 to $22. So you have met your goal of affordability. You may be wondering what I think about that, because I'm involved in an organization called Equal Access to Broadband. It does not eliminate the challenges that low-income households have in qualifying for the ACP. So it's two different issues. Thank you.
Other questions?
So Christine, what that spreadsheet told me is if you were 100% funded, the cost to the consumer for operation and maintenance, customer service, any of that stuff is a flat fee of $46 based on the assumptions.
Yeah, that would be an average for the state, but that gets to that. I think that would trigger Holly's question. How is it for each CUD we would have to do? Yeah.
Right. I just think that's I just want to be very clear for anybody who's watching today or listening in that that's kind of a minimum threshold, absent any subsidies that Holly's talking about. That's kind of like the least cost that we could get to if everything were funded for construction 100%.
On average.
On average for the state, understood.
Yeah. This is, again, another scenario where, Christine, I assume you're going to take this to a VCUDA meeting, and could you report back with their feedback or how you adjust the table accordingly?
Yes, happy to.
It's really important. Thanks for doing it.
You're welcome.
Okay, anything else on this spreadsheet?
And,
All right,
and
are we
because
good?
it's so much fun, can we all have a link to
Yeah,
it?
it is fun, and I will make sure you all have a link to it. I do not see our guests yet.
Holly, just so you know, I think you already have a link to it in your email with the board packet.
Help us that, because I don't understand where to get that.
No, I don't either.
I can resend it again, but when I sent the board packet, I put a link to this spreadsheet. But I'll
Where?
resend it.
Do you have, like, I
It's
don't,
okay, I'll resend it.
that's perfect. If it's
That's
in
a-
here, I didn't see it either.
There's a lot of
Yeah,
stuff
we-
in there.
It was in the actual email that the board packet was attached to.
Okay. Christine, what's your pleasure for next agenda item?
Well, we have Louis Porter and Peter Rossi. Louis is from, he's the executive director of Washington Electric Co-op, and Peter Rossi is the operations VP for Vermont Electric Co-op. And I have had several meetings with Mike Burke from GMP. I will speak for GMP in this next discussion. This is related to, what the utilities are doing in terms of getting ready for Make Ready and how the CUDs should be interacting with the utilities. And it gets to some of the, we've seen some concerns from the CUDs regarding some of the bills that they're getting. So what I plan for this, Patty, assuming the board accepts this, is to do this in a panel presentation. I'll speak for GMP. Peter Rossi will speak for VEC. Louis will speak for Washington Electric Co-op. A few minutes to say what they're doing, and then take questions, and particularly like to hear from the CUDs. Is that acceptable to you, Patty?
Yep, that sounds great. And I'd just like to say hello to Louis and Dave. Hi, my friends at WEC, and hi, Peter. Hope all is well at VEC as well. Happy to turn it over to you, Christine.
Okay, so
Can I just have a clarification? Christine, are you saying that GMP could not send a representative today? I'm just feeling really uncomfortable.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should explain why. They're in the middle of union negotiations right now. And that does, I've been through union negotiations. That does consume it consumes the operations folks for sure.
Yes.
And I do felt, GMP has been very cooperative. I've been speaking to Mike Burke on a regular basis. I reviewed, the information with him Friday to make sure I'm properly representing them here at the board. He apologizes profusely for not attending because he recognized the importance of this issue. So,
thank you.
So anyway, what GMP is doing, GMP has basically
Christine,
averages.
before we jump in, one group that's obviously missing is the municipalities, Burlington, VEPSA members. Have you had any discussions with them?
I have. VEPSA is challenging because it's, 13 different municipals and yeah, I would rather not get into that in detail here, but it's been challenging.
Okay, so any of the municipal systems are basically off the table for this discussion. Burlington's a different animal because Burlington is not in a unserved situation, but many of the municipalities are. And I will just disclose, I work as a consultant on behalf of Barton Electric, and they certainly have many underserved areas as well. But this discussion will not include any of the VEPSA municipalities.
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay, I'm good.
All right. So anyway, GMP has essentially set in place the capacity to double. Their plan was to set in capacity in place to double the amount of make-ready work they can do for a year. They average about 4,500 poles per year. They're planning for 9,000 pole changes per year based on, and I'll use pole changes as standard in order to meet the broadband requirements. Now, GMP is getting overwhelmed with make-ready requests, but they've certainly done a pretty admirable job of bringing in contractors. They brought in 3 additional contractors to Riggs Distler, JCR, and Northline in order to meet the capacity for double their volume. They have 10,000 poles on order. They have 1,500 poles in inventory. Poles have not been a problem. Now the challenge, with pricing, is that because they're using contractors, and by the way, they have all 150 of their line workers pretty much consumed in doing the make-ready work. So the contractors add to the cost, and those costs get passed directly along to the CUDs. So there will be elevated costs because of this increased bill, and as a result of having to pay the contractors more. They're also, they fully comply with PUC Rule 3700, which dictates how you handle the make-ready costs. So some of the issues, the concern of if any of the individual districts, they have many districts. So if any of the individual districts if any of the CUDs have a problem with that, we can elevate that through the VCBB, and we'll take that and work that with GMP. So there's a general position that GMP has following Rule 3700, but it's still, that gets into interpretation on the field. But certainly from a pole replacement, it's pretty straightforward. It's done depreciated value of the pole. Anyway, that's me speaking for GMP. Peter, I'll turn it over to you for VEC.
Okay. I have a small presentation for you all.
Okay. All right.
If it's going to allow me to choose it.
Alyssa, does Peter have permission to share screen? Hang on, I think I can check that. There we go. You got it, Peter.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. I'm actually working with Sorrel right this second on finding out how many poles we changed without make ready, but I just threw about 3 or 4 slides together to kind of give you a perspective of what we've done in 2021. And I apologize for the first line. That should be just consolidated into charter all at once. I had a pivot table that was feeding this. So in the last 2 years, we've had 5,248 total attachments requested. As some of you may know, we also have a tariff with the PUC that was signed in early 2021, where we offset some of the capital expenditures for make ready if it's going to serve somebody who is considered unserved of 4-1 and below. And over the last 2 years, 295 of the services from all of the requests that we've received qualify for that, mainly with NEK Broadband. Honestly, I work probably closest with Krista as far as VEC and a CUD, because they're doing the most amount of work outside of Velco with that capital project. So that's where a lot of our qualifying locations are for the last 2 years. As you can see, we're roughly under 300 miles of make ready that we are across all of the various broadband utilities. When I say miscellaneous work here, that's operating costs like changing drip loops, moving neutrals, that kind of thing. So, about 511 of those poles had to have something done to them. And we also had an additional 343 poles that we had to replace for make ready due to varying issues, whether it be an NESC violation or the pole was just simply too small to accommodate another strand of fiber, whatnot. These were identified by both consolidated if they're attached and other attachees, plus the attachee that wants to be the next one on the pole. And as you can see, this is actually having a pretty profound impact on VEC's bottom line. The majority of that is from Velco, where a lot of their fiber is going across our 34.5 line with a 12.470 underbuild, and that's causing us to eat a lot of that cost. I have not reached out to Velco yet regarding that, but GMP has also noticed that that project has made a significant dent in their CapEx investment in Make Ready. And then, you can see our incentive amount so far is not as high as we had anticipated. I'm not saying that these numbers are absolutely perfect, but they give you a pretty good relative perspective of where we're at and what investment VEC is making toward Make Ready. So just to remind the board that on March 19th of 2021, we have a 3-year program that we contribute $2,000 to the capital cost for each qualifying location, with an annual cap of $1 million for a total program cap of about $3 million. You saw from the other slide, we're not spending nearly that. However, we are spending a lot of money on the other side of the capital investment, basically because we don't know what routes the CUDs or Velco we're going to take. And when they take a certain route, there might be an NESC violation on that line. So not caused by the CUD and not caused by Velco, but nonetheless by Rule 3.700, because it's a NESC violation, we have to eat that cost. However, the but for always comes in that these are totally fine poles, somewhere in the order of maybe 15 to 20 years old. There's no issues with them, but they may not have been tall enough when they were originally installed for an underbuild and for attachments. So now they have to be replaced. And so that definitely has an impact on our capital bottom line. So again, the program is capped at 50% for any one entity. And then the second, it's capped at 50% for the first 500,000. And then the second 500,000 is prioritized by the bullets there for qualifying locations, cost reductions already received by the customer, who could be federal subsidies or whatnot, and then geographic location. We try to disperse the dollars as much as we can to make sure that all areas of the of our territory are covered appropriately. And that's going to expire a year from March. So that program has about 1.5 years left, I guess. We are also free of charge storing Lamoille CUD's fiber. We received the first shipment on September 7th. It included 30.5 miles of 144 strand and 15.25 miles of 48 strand. As Christine mentioned, most larger applications are handled with contractors. If there's a 1 or 2 pole tap, we handle that internally. That's not a problem. But I was pretty clear with this board at the beginning that we would be contracting out the vast majority of Make Ready. And so far that's been very successful, and we're able to keep our current capital plan intact, while we also have met the 3.700 timing rules without missing a beat so far. However, we have not reached the 500 miles per year yet, and that's still the maximum amount of Make Ready that I can handle at VEC without affecting timeframes, frankly. But we haven't seen that 500 miles yet. However, there is some risk that some CUDs have not started, and as you can see, we have really minimal consolidated communications work so far. It's mainly been Velco and the NEK CUD. You know, for us, the Lamoille FiberNet CUD is the one that's smack dab in the middle of our territory, and they haven't really put in any applications as of yet. So want to set expectations that I think Krista has a very good, you know, project plan. She has a plan out there. I've reviewed it with her. I think it looks good. I'm not saying it doesn't change, you know, based on things that come up, but I have yet to see a project plan from either the Northwest CUD or Lamoille FiberNet. And, you know, we have to keep in mind that we can handle about 500 miles of make ready a year, again, without affecting the timeframes. The other thing, Christine, that you and I have spoken about several times is poles are, you know, suffering supply chain length of time or issues. And, you know, we used to be able to get poles in 1 or 2 weeks. They're now out about 8 weeks. We have plenty of stock. We stocked up for storms and for the make ready work that we know about, and also our capital projects and stuff like that. But if things start, you know, accelerating next year with other CUDs coming on board, you know, there could be risk that supply chain issues could affect those timeframes that are spelled out in 3.700. And then this is just a little diagram. I sort of threw it in here on, you know, how many different things are being touched by broadband, at least at VEC, and all the different entities that kind of go into the various projects. And I was including the Velco project because that project alone, while it has broadband aspects to it, it really is to meet an ISO New England requirement. So it has a lot of things that are going to happen into our substations, security items that we're working out with Velco, different pieces of equipment that are going to be installed. There is, you know, tree trimming that goes along with all of this make ready. Sometimes those aren't up to spec. So, you know, if it's a line we hadn't gotten to yet, we have to do that tree trimming. And then of course the pole replacements are a big portion of that. So I tried to keep that to 10 minutes, Christine, per our discussion. So that's what I have.
Thank you, Peter. Louis.
Hi, great to see you all, and thanks for the invite. I'm Louis Porter, General Manager of Washington Electric. I have with me Dave Kresak, our Chief of Operations, who was one of the great things that Patty did for Washington Electric Co-op was hiring Dave. So thank you, Patty.
You're very welcome.
I will just give you a brief overview of Make Ready and the broadband work from Washington Electric's perspective. I'll ask Dave to jump in where he would like, and I got a couple of things I'll show you briefly as well if I can. Washington Electric comes to this from a slightly different perspective, given that we originally planned on building out the fiber in our territory largely ourselves and then leasing it to the CUDs. When it became clear earlier this year that that didn't make sense, either for the CUDs or for us, we shifted into a support role for the CUD project, but are still very, very committed to broadband development in our territory. Both because we have an obligation to do it under the rules, but also because we view it as essential to the well-being and economic well-being of the territory that we work in, that we serve. So starting earlier this year, we shifted into getting ready for Make Ready and supporting the CUDs in our territory, primarily CV fiber, but also NEK and EC fiber. Right now, we're storing, as VEC is, we're storing a lot of fiber for CV fiber. We're currently working on an agreement to allow CV fiber to operate out of 1 or 2 of our substations and have their equipment there. And then mostly our work is on the Make Ready work that's the subject of our conversation today. And like the broadband work itself, no surprise to anybody on this meeting, members per mile or customers per mile is a huge deal, both in terms of broadband, but also in terms of our make ready. We have relatively small crew of people working at Washington Electric for a fairly large territory and fairly few members per mile. So we have largely shifted our the work of our crews to make ready and away from other work that they might otherwise be doing for Washington Electric, with obviously exceptions for outages, new connects, things that we have to get done. And it has been a lot of work for us and an effort for us. I'm proud to say that we are keeping up very well with it, and are doing, I think, well. And the feedback we get from the CUDs, especially CV Fiber, which is our closest relationship, has been very positive. And we've tried to learn from the work we've done on Make Ready in the past, including with EC Fiber. So I'll just show you briefly a couple of things here. Let's see. Can you see that spreadsheet?
Yes.
Great. So this is just the way that we track make ready requests. And don't want to point out anything here except that our method and for a small organization, fairly large number of projects we have going. And here I'll show you, if I could, the summary, which is a little bit more intelligible.
Yeah, we just lost your.
Yeah, I went away from it. That's why.
Okay.
Here is our summary of what we've received so far and where we are in terms of make ready across the different types. You'll see from the from this box over here in the bottom left the times where we are at versus the requirements and the schedule set out in the rule. So I'm frankly pleasantly surprised, happy with our ability to keep up with the incoming work so far. We do have contracts with outside crews, both on tree trimming and to do the actual pole make ready work if necessary. We haven't yet utilized those contracts because we've been able to keep up with it in-house, but we do have those contracts with outside entities standing by. I have to say that everything has changed since the hurricane in Florida for us. We were doing quite well in terms of transformer inventory, pole inventory, and other things. And then when about the same time that the hurricane arrived, and we had our suppliers reach out to us and delay orders for a lot of crucial elements. And so we are concerned about that, in particular for make ready poles. But we are so far keeping up and I think doing quite well in terms of the schedule and the timing. We have been working closely with the CUDs to schedule the work that absolutely needs to get done, that they're ready to do construction on first, and to be flexible in terms of which applications go first and which projects go first. And so far, I think we're doing well. But like I say, I am concerned about pole and transformer inventory going forward, and when we're going to get deliveries for those components. So I'll just ask Dave to weigh in here and add to or correct anything there, and then happy to take questions or have a conversation about any of this.
Yeah, we've been keeping tabs of everything from the amount of work, locations. We meet pretty much every week with our main CUD, which is CV Fiber, and we discuss all this information with them on a weekly basis. So they're very aware of our situation and theirs as well. With us, we know which locations they want us to concentrate on. We've already done that. They have given us several locations that we've already completed make-ready work on that will put them through, when they start construction, through the end of the year and into next spring. So we're very well ahead of their needs, I think, at the moment. We've also been dealing with our vendors on lead times, trying to narrow those down to get better information. We've increased our order sizes. At the moment, however, though, we are kind of in a preservation mode. We need to prepare for the winter and make sure that we have enough of materials on hand to take care of any kind of outages or storm event that does damage in our system. So we are watching that very carefully. As we get materials in, we look at our backlog and determine which areas that we concentrate on first to finish those out.
Great. I'll stop sharing here. Happy to send that to you, Christine, if that would be helpful, either of those documents.
Yeah,
Thank
that'd
you.
be great if you can, and then we'll share it with everybody.
Will do.
Just question is, your summary, you talked about the preservation of materials for winter construction. What does that mean for the CUDs in terms of make ready?
Well, what it really means for the CUDs and others is having to work out with us and discuss with us which projects go first and the schedule for projects. I don't want to put poles or transformers at a new connection where the house isn't going to be occupied or electricity isn't going to be used until the middle of next year. And similarly, I don't want to be putting materials or staff time at make ready that is far out in the construction season. So in the construction schedule. So we've been working with the CUDs to make sure that we get done the work that they need to have done, but also make sure that we can keep enough poles and other materials so that we can repair outages over the winter. I don't know if that's enough specificity or if you had something more particular.
Well, when we turn it to the CDs, there may be more questions in that area. But,
sure.
At this point, I'll turn it over to you, Patty, to kind of moderate the questions.
Okay. Laura's hand is up. So Laura, I'm going to give you first shot.
Thanks. And thanks, Louis. This is, I've heard this before, even when we didn't have, as much money as we have flowing into the state for broadband and grid infrastructure improvements. In fact, Brian and I have had these conversations in different settings, I think, around the scheduling of make-ready work. So my question is, for you, do you have some sense of what would make it, what the CUDs could do or should do in order to do the scheduling? Is there something that's apparent to you, like, oh, if they just did this, it would be easier for them to do the scheduling?
I think they're doing exactly what they ought to be doing, which is being in touch with us. And as Dave said, we're talking to them on a weekly basis and updating them both on our supplies and then getting the update from them on what applications are coming down and what the priority list is. So I think they're doing what they need to be doing. They've been great partners and very understanding on the need to be flexible and to keep this as an ongoing conversation. So I think they're doing what they can do. And as are we. I mean, we have dramatically increased our supply orders over the last year or so. And we were pretty well on track until we got this most recent round of delays from some of our suppliers. And we still are on track. We just see a possible concern if our orders of our suppliers are delayed again from the deliveries that are currently pending.
Okay.
I don't know if I answered the question, Representative Sebelia, but I think we're doing what we need to do. And actually, it was a suggestion from EC Fiber to us to meet on a regular and frequent basis with the CUDs.
Okay, so that's actually, I think, exactly what I was looking for, and maybe you just restated it. And so I guess, Christine, would you say that that's fairly? Do you know if that is fairly consistent with the other CUDs, or is that different depending on where we are and which utility we're dealing with? That those regular meetings are happening?
I don't know if those regular meetings are happening. That's really an offshoot of this. That was actually a request from Green Mountain Power. Is they're, they're getting a deluge of applications, and certainly meeting regularly with their districts. That was a request. I would encourage the CUDs, and we'll follow up to make sure this is happening, that they're meeting regularly with the districts, and that they will report back, escalate any issues that may need to be escalated as a result of the meetings. But Peter, if you want to add to that, Peter, do you?
Well, the two biggest projects we have, we did meet regularly, and now we're just in execution mode, so that's going well. I mean, Krista reaches out all the time. She's very communicative, very transparent, no issues there. It's hit or miss with Val from Lamoille, because I think they're still in the planning stages right now. He doesn't hesitate to reach out when he needs to, but I don't think we're meeting regularly with them because I don't think they're at that, at that point. And then with Velco, again, we're also in execution mode. So we do still have regular biweekly meetings. I think they're biweekly, Dan, if I'm not mistaken. And then, we're in execution mode, so I don't meet with Alan Stamp every week like I was last year. So, but there's no issues with the projects themselves. And just to let Lewis know for full transparency that if we do run into any supply chain issues, we have contracts with some of the truck drivers to divert all material to VEC from WEC. So if you run into some issues, give me a call and I can maybe call off the dogs. So
I suspected that was the case, Peter. I suspected that was.
Well, I am Italian, so we have to go back to our roots in the 1960s when we divert the trucks. So
that co-op spirit is live and well.
Right.
So that's it for me. But Christine, as you are well aware, and as Patty pointed out, the munis are very different, and so it's a pretty big, it's a pretty big, small voice we're not hearing from. So, it'd be good to have a sense of what challenges they're able to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Christine, I realize there's some hands up, but the one comment that was made at the beginning of this is that the CUDs have indicated some concern with costs. Is that going to this board? Because I have not received any complaints or issues from any of the CUDs. So I just wanted to clarify what was meant by that.
Yeah, and I think when we turn this over to Rob Vietzke of VCUDA, he has a few statements and questions to ask as well related to that.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, Holly's up next. You're on mute, Holly.
This is just a quick question. All you utility people know why Velco's sucking all the air out of the room. Could you just explain what their project is and whether or not it would make any difference, or whether we even could ask them to let CUDs have first dibs in the coming construction year?
Well,
would it make any difference, and what is this project?
I don't think it's going to make any difference. I'll speak for VEC. I don't want to speak for Lewis. I don't know on his side. But from our perspective, we knew this one was coming. And so a summary of the project is ISO New England is kind of blind to generation that's at the distribution level. And for them to make decisions, and for Velco to make decisions based on generation, and we're talking generation that's about 150 kW or greater, they need to have real-time data to those generators. And so this project was to bring fiber to any generation that doesn't already have fiber, so that they can backhaul it through our substation, through our control center, right back to Velco. And in some cases they do it direct, but through our interconnect, that's really the basis for the project. When we were developing the project, we worked hand in hand with the other owners of Velco. There's a subcommittee to the Velco operating committee, and we decided that you're already doing the make ready. You're already putting fiber up in the air. Let's make sure that we're building out for at least a decade to a decade and a half for what we need as distribution and Velco operating to operate Velco and the DUs. And then we also, for pennies on the dollar, could put in another additional strands that could be leased to the CUD so that we could offset some of the costs. It was a way for Velco and some of the DUs to invest in broadband. And so we, instead of putting up just the bare minimum, I think 72 strand fiber, we ended up going with 144 strands, the first 72 being dedicated to Velco, and then the next 12 strands being dedicated to the distribution utilities, leaving, I don't know, somewhere on the order of about 60 strands for leasing to the various broadband utilities, either for backhaul, middle mile, that kind of thing. So that's the auspice of the entire project. Now, as far as like impact, as you can see from our numbers, they are a big project, but we're almost done. So it's, if they were in conflict with, say, other CUDs and with the Northeast Kingdom CUD, I'd say, yeah, we could probably prioritize it, and they've been very flexible with timeframes. Allen Stamp hasn't really held us to the 4.700 timeframes. Obviously, they want to see the project done. It's not like they're just going to let it go forever. But you know, if we had tripped over ourselves a little bit and couldn't get it within the 3.700, they weren't going to pursue us with the PUC or anything like that. We talk all the time, so it would not be an issue.
I would just second what Peter said. Like VEC, we're closing in on the later end of that project with Velco on our end, and it is a really important project, both for us and also providing some help for the broadband project as well here and there. So I would say no. And the second point I'd like to make is, you know, we are staying up on the schedule. We are ahead of the CUDs in their build out, and we are meeting the rule schedule requirements. So we're getting there. We are ahead of the requirements and what we need to do so far. I just wanted to flag, both for all of you and for the CUDs, that we have gone from being pretty confident in our supplies to a little nervous. But I would say I don't think there'll be a conflict with the Velco project, and I do think we'll continue to meet those deadlines. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm going to jump in real quick. Christine, to you, it was teed up to us that this looked like a more of an issue. So is there a disconnect between what the CUDs are saying on their end and what we're hearing from the utility side?
Let's hear from Laura's got her hand up, but after we're done with the board, let's hear from Rob.
No,
from
sorry, that's a mistake.
Okay, so Rob, I do, hold on, I'm not done with my questions. I do want to hear from the CUDs, their perspective, because this sounds all warm and fuzzy on the utility side. So there's a disconnect there in terms of what we saw in our packet in your lead into this issue. So a couple other questions for both for WEC and VEC. Has this been a pretty quiet storm year for you guys?
Really, Patty, as being an utility person, you're going to ask that question right now going into the winter season?
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yes, April was we had the last year Christmas storm, which kind of fizzled out. I think that hit the GMP territory more than it hit us. Then GMP, WEC, us, pretty much everybody in Vermont all got hit in April. Not a huge event, but definitely lasted probably 3 or 4 days after cleanup and all of that kind of thing. So, you know, we had a July thunderstorm that ripped through. That was about a day and a half, maybe 2 days worth of lightning, especially in the Northeast Kingdom. So, you know, on the grand scheme of things, besides you're jinxing everybody in Vermont, you know, for the last couple of years, it actually has been I would say, tamer. A lot more major minor storms than actual major storms like Storm Bruce or the Halloween storm from 2019, that kind of thing. So
Yeah. So your Sadie and Katie stats are running below average, I take it from what you're just saying?
yeah, when
Okay.
compared to the rest of the nation, yeah, they're looking pretty stellar actually. If I don't,
Okay.
you know, I don't
Is
mind
that
patting
true?
myself on the back. So
Is that
go
true
ahead.
for you guys too at WAC?
Yeah, yes, it is. And in fact, this summer there were a couple of times where storms had some noticeable damage all around our territory and not in Washington Electric territory, which, as you know better than anybody, Patty, is not the norm. And I'm not counting on it continuing, but we were glad to see it. So yeah, it was a good storm year for us, and we're hoping for another one.
Yeah, Dave has done a good job building up the infrastructure in this short few years there. Thank you, Dave. The reason I asked that question is, as you said, is if we get into a busy storm cycle, your crews are going to have to focus on repair and store and put the power back on, which is obviously your primary obligation and your first focus to do. The contractors that you have that would help out on the make ready work, I'm just curious, are they the same entity between WEC, VEC, and GMP? Are they different entities?
For us, Riggs Distler, so yes, the same, and also, the same that got pulled to do a lot of work in Florida and in the Southeast. So it is a concern. I will say I've been glad that we've been able to keep up with the make ready internally so far, leaving the possibility of those outside crews being available. But if there's a big storm, we're going to all be drawing on the same resources.
Okay.
Agreed.
Right.
Yep. Agreed. We use Riggs and JCR, and both those contractors, Vance to set poles and ledge, and all three of those contractors are used by GMP and obviously WEC. So.
Okay. All right. That's good to know, because it sounds like if make ready really kicks into gear and amplifies tremendously in terms of increased applications to you guys, we could run into, it sounds like right now we're in a sweet spot, but we could run into some issues if we have high storm activity and if the load of the make ready applications really increases.
Correct. That is a risk.
Okay.
Certainly, and I would say from at least, I don't know if Dave agrees with this, but from my perspective, the materials would be just as big a risk there as the outside crews. If we had to replace a ton of poles, we'd be in rough shape for doing make ready until we could get those restocked.
Okay. Is there any discussion among you guys about doing some sharing agreements?
We do that ad hoc. I've gotten calls from Stowe, not so much on poles, although we have given out poles to sold poles to other utilities, and mainly on transformers, different size transformers that they might not have gotten in, and maybe we have one or two in stock. We'll keep a storm stock behind, but we sell it to them. So I don't know if there's an actual agreement, but it works really well. If so, we're all on Team Vermont, we'll figure it out. So
okay, that's great to hear. Okay, I see. Before we move over to the CUDs, Dan Nelson, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to check. Is there any of that make ready work that is caused by Velco's fiber attachment? Does that help clear the way in regards to like pole attachments or cleanup work for the CUDs who are coming later?
Yes. If they take that route.
If they take that route, so it could in fact be helping accelerate the CUD work when that construction phase starts.
Yeah, I need to speak with Velco on that whole construction thing. I think there's a solution there to be had, and I just have not had an opportunity to reach out to Colin or you or anybody to have that discussion yet. So
okay.
Yeah, actually your question triggers a point that Mike Burke made. We in one particular case, GMP was a little frustrated because they did make ready for one private telecom company that went through an area, and then had to turn around and go, because they were only putting up 48 fiber. And then of course the CUD comes through with 144 fiber. It says, look, I get to do MIC ready twice. So that's another point to make, is we want to if we can coordinate. I've seen some notes where some of the private telecom carriers have been giving a significant number of applications. So I think that goes on the action to-do list, is for us at the CUD to figure out how do we coordinate with those private telecom providers such as Comcast and Spectrum and the smaller ones as well. Okay, I guess we could turn it over to Rob Vietzke, maybe.
If that's all right. So first, I had a couple prepared thoughts, and then the CUDs did put together a few questions this morning that we can share with you. But I think the first is just a thank you to Christine and VCBB for setting up this discussion in this forum. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm new staff to VCUDA. This is about 10 weeks in, and VCUDA is the Association of the CUDs. So, first, I just want to say generally the CUDs are very pleased with the personal relationships and the spirit of collaboration. And I think one of you said Team Vermont, recognizing the importance of bringing broadband to unserved and underserved Vermonters, and working very collaboratively and positively towards that. And, I think that absolutely the CUDs have found those personal calls with you, those weekly calls, and just kind of the ability to pick up the phone to be critical. And the thing they absolutely want to avoid is any kind of more formal regulatory approach to poll management and make ready and those kinds of things. So that's a thank you and a recognition that the kind of camaraderie and teamwork in getting this problem done is super helpful. And to some of the earlier questions specific to this call, no, I haven't heard any complaints about these two particular areas of the state or service areas, and honestly, that's a good sign. So kudos to you guys. More generally across the state, this is for the VCBB folks, and maybe for the WEC and the VC folks who are here can help provide some context too. We are at this moment, right, where we're going to be ramping up a bunch of new CUDs from nothing to their very first construction. And so they're in this moment where they had excellent engineering reviews done and make-ready studies done and estimates done, and they've submitted those and they're starting to see the applications come back. And they're seeing the timelines out of those, and they're seeing the bills associated with those. And neither is, I would say, meeting the expectations. And there's probably 50% of that's just a reality check that construction is hard, and that storms happen, resources get diverted in exactly appropriate ways, right? There's nothing wrong with that. It's just reality. And the other half of it is just better understanding some of the long-term financial models of pole maintenance and make-ready fees and crew coordination and other things. And so, I think in our request was that we really wanted to start and open a conversation with the pole owners at the kind of sponsorship that you guys represent as the executives of these companies about continuing Team Vermont and how best we move forward. Christine's mentioned a number in the past of about 9,000 poles we think need to get replaced over a 5-year period, or about 1,800 a year across the state.
Oh, that was mileage. That was not necessarily poles.
That was what? Sorry.
That was mileage.
That was miles. Thank you.
According to Peter Rossi, I think they do about 2.3. Did I get that right? 2.3 poles per mile or something like average for your make ready.
It's down to 1.2 now.
Okay.
But you were right, Christine. When we started this, that's the best data we had. But now that we're doing more, the percentages are zeroing in. So
it's probably it's over 9,000, but probably not too much like 12.
I think the point there was, of course, the CUDs would love to beat expectations of those Vermonters who want service. You know, if they could get these projects done in less than 5 years, they would. And so what we're really getting into now is just the averages, right? It's not an even 1,800 polls a year over 5 years.
Yeah,
they're all coming in early. You're getting a bunch of them now, and we need to figure out how best to coordinate that, prioritize it, figure out how to get contiguous service areas done. You know, talk about issues like, so we have a 200 poll application where 198 of them are simple make ready that could be done through self-help or some expedited process, and 2 of them force it over into complex make ready. Is there any way we can keep that on the fast track? You know, those kinds of conversations. And again, I think there are other utilities in the state where we need to kind of start to figure out how to get out of the very productive district conversations and start talking about how we, the VCBB and you guys, you know, create some of the dashboards you were just showing and start to track this and think about prioritization of those activities. So those are just general comments. You know, again, I want to emphasize that the CUDs overall are, you know, really appreciative and want to keep building on these relationships as the rubber starts to meet the road, and continue the great collaboration that started.
Rob, do you know, are there any spots around the state from the utility perspective that the CUDs are having difficulties?
Well, so I can tell you that, you know, from the timing perspective, you know, DB Fiber and Maple are the ones who are kind of coming out of the initial make ready studies and starting to, you know, want to pay for applications. And so they're doing the deep comparison of the estimates against the actual bills that are coming in and trying to better understand them.
Okay. Because I mean, what I'm hearing from, you know, at least the two utilities we have in the room, and anecdotally for GMP through Christine, all is well. And if there are any issues or any spots, I mean, I think the utilities in general, at least when I put my own utility hat on, I used to work at Washington Electric Co-op, Rob, so you know that connection point.
Yeah.
We were all very much, you know, this is good for our members, it's good for the constituents, the ratepayers, we want it to happen. How do we get it to happen? So you've got a very, you know, Team Vermont is on this for sure. Yep. Over these last 2 years, all the utilities have been, how do we make this happen, not standing in the way of it. But if you know of it, that there are areas or any issues for particular utilities, let us know.
Yeah, okay, well, so let me try and pivot on that a little bit. Again, I do not think the CUDs want to say that there are issues. What we want to do is continue to build trust and collaboration around a really aggressive time schedule and a lot of polls that need to get done. And, you know, particularly in Southern Vermont, there are, you know, a number of places where the initial expectations coming out of the studies are not matching kind of what the implementation might look like out of the poll applications and the initial invoices. And so we don't want to call those issues yet. Gotcha. What we wanted to do, and this was part of it, was just start a higher level conversation and education process to get all on the same page. And no one wants to do anything other than move forward in a positive way, and the relationships are great. So it's more that we need to call more attention to it, keep on top of it, collaborate more, and all of those things. And I really hesitate to say there's an issue because we don't know that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, Rob, let me just follow up with that, because I think there's a big disconnect between the theoretical planning stage and when you start, and I see Krista's hand is up. Maybe she'll back me up on this, but there was a lot of conversations between Krista and me and even Rebecca and everything as you know, they were trying to formulate what the plan was. And then once we started executing it, I mean, so there's a lot of planning that went into these projects and a lot of maps. And we sat down for, you know, several hour conversations here and there, asking a ton of questions. And so that's really why these projects are going, well, hopefully she'll say they're going smoothly, because of the planning. And the sticker shock might be there because maybe the right questions weren't being asked. and the costs do ebb and flow depending on where you're going. So, you know, 3 things just to keep in mind. If there are already NESC violations on the pole and we can't rectify it very easily by moving a neutral up and down, then that cost is borne by the utility. If there are not NESC violations, all of the costs are going to be borne by the attaching entity. Okay. And so it really depends. If we have an older line and that's where these entities want to go, they, you know, an average that Christine even put out at like 2.3% or something like that could actually be like 5 or 10%.
Yeah.
You know, and then there's other areas where it could be as low as 0.1%, you know, so it really averages out, and it really depends on the age of the areas that you're going to. So just something to keep in mind as you're having these conversations and you're planning. You know, you might have, like, say if you have a set budget, right? You might be going down this line and have to do it over 2 years with that same amount of money that you could do twice as much miles going down this line, right? That might be the sticker shock that some of these CUDs are seeing.
Yeah, and I actually, so I mean, in our internal conversations, you know, folks are very open to all of that, and of course, we have some of the CUDs who are farther along in this process and been doing it for a while, and so, you know, all of that's coming up. I think, you know, where it gets where we need to continue the conversation is, you know, about timelines and about, you know, how to kind of zero out these bills and understand those averages. You know, some of it is as simple as going back to the write-outs that were done for the initial surveys and comparing to the notes of what's happening now and saying, okay, did we notice that pole rot? Did we just miss it? Is it, you know, or you know, other such things like that? You know, so I think this really is just an intense period where, as you went through with Krista and others in starting up their effort, we need to, you know, help facilitate that in some of these other areas as well, other areas of the state.
That's fair.
Yeah, and you know, again, you know, I can't emphasize enough. Folks want to work together. They appreciate Team Vermont. It's more about, you know, this is really going to be a busy period coming up, and how do we get best positioned for that?
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much. I see we have one hand up from the general public, and what I'd like to do is limit the public Q&A on this to the CUDs, to ask the utilities a few questions, and let's do 5 minutes of CUD questions of the utilities. And Krista has her hand up.
Thanks, Patty. So yes, I would like to support what Peter said. BEC has been fantastic to work with, and it's been a really good collaboration, and it's very easy to, you know, they're very sort of by the book, which is, you know, they're not trying to like pawn a lot of things off onto us, and it's just like, hey, if it's in violation, we got it. If it's not, you got it. And so that's really excellent. So I just want to make a couple of points. You know, Peter mentioned the 500 miles, and that's an illustration of the challenges that we're going to be facing, right? And so we've talked about this a bit in the past and as well, but I just think it's important for the board to understand the perspective. You know, for the NEK, if I want to get this project done in 5 years, which is what everybody wants, then that means 600 miles a year, and because you're really building for, you know, make ready for 4 years, your 5th year is all your build. And so, and that's assuming that I've already done that 400 miles, which I have. So that, you know, that will become an issue in the coming year between Northwest and Lamoille and NEK all being in the same VEC area. And that's something that we're going to have to continue to sort of work through and see how we do. The second point that I wanted to make is that and I guess I'll turn this into a question, but I am, one of the people on my board is a procurement specialist for utility plants. So in other words, he makes the procurements to build utility plants. And he has, he came up to me at our first in-person board meeting on Saturday and just made me very aware of some things that happened last week. It's in relation to the war and the impact on transformers and some other items. And those things are going to trickle to us if they haven't already. And so they, he's hyper on top of it because of where he is at and what he's doing. But where lead times extended out 18 months past what they had anticipated. And I would just think that we might want to consider, this is sort of along the Team Vermont thing, but I just think we might want to consider, are there ways in which we can work together as a state to create more purchasing power? Are there ways in which the CUDs can support pre-purchases through our grant funds? Are there ideas on how we might do that? And then, so I'll pose that as a question, but I'll make one last statement. It is important to be able to look at what you have going on and make adjustments, right? Like there's a 190 pole app that's got 58 pole replacements on it, and the vast majority of those are on VEC's dime. Well, that might not be the best use of poles and transformers for us right now if we can take that and do it someplace else. So we are trying to work strategically with them to say, no, put that on hold and let's take those resources and spread them out over a lot more miles and get a lot more bang for our unserved buck. So that's just something to consider as you're working with them, and that can help change things. But any thoughts on, I don't know, either joint purchasing or stockpiling, or whether or not CUDs can help in general, or the VCBB, or those types of things? Because I think we are going to continue to run into supply chain solution issues as more and more states get on the broadband bandwagon and get their act together. I think we're going to see, and I mean, a lot more of the country does underground than we do, but I still think we're going to see an increased issue there. Thank you. And thank you, Peter and Louis and Dave for the work that you've done to date.
Yeah, Krista, thank you very much. And we enjoyed working with you a little bit early on. You're not really working so much in our territory right now, but we look forward to when that changes again. I just wanted to respond to a couple of things. One is we're very interested in any kind of collaboration or joint effort that can be done to address some of the material shortfalls or any of these other issues. I'll say for Washington Electric's perspective, it's not that we've been overbuying or increasing our purchase orders for over a year now. It's not that we are concerned about cash flow and not buying or storage or anything else. We've been buying where we can and increase doubling or more our orders than we normally would pretty much across the board. So it's just a question of whether the suppliers will actually deliver, not to be too candid here, but whether the suppliers will actually deliver the materials they promise when you place an order. It's easy to find vendors, suppliers who will tell you they can provide you stuff, and it's harder to get those orders to actually show up, at least in our experience. So I just ask you to keep in mind that I think there is some room for collaboration, and we're very open to it. I just caution people that just because a supplier or a vendor says they can get it to you doesn't mean it'll actually show up at the date that they tell you it will. So that's one item. The other is, I just, while I have this group available to us, I just want to make a couple of points. One of which is, I think we're running into an issue, and likely will more, with other attaching entities in the make-ready work. And we have a limited amount of control we can exert there. We're doing what we can, but the other attaching entities doing their make ready is a challenge and is going to continue to be a challenge. And it doesn't serve our interest or the CUD's interest for that to be true. So we're doing everything we can there, but it's just a fact that in some cases that portion of the make ready is not getting done as rapidly as we'd like. And the last thing, probably apparent to everybody on this call, but I'll say it nonetheless. We share an interest and a mission with the CUDs. Washington Electric Co-op wouldn't exist except for the desire to serve underserved areas, in our case, electricity, and the CUD's case, broadband. But we also have an obligation and a legal obligation to not allow any cost shift to electric ratepayers. And so I think the collaboration has been really good, and I look forward to continuing. And the CUDs have been very understanding of our obligations to electric ratepayers. But I just want to reiterate that, and while I had the mic here, thank you.
Yeah, good points. There's one other question that has come up. Hand is raised. I think it's Ellie. Ellie, you're up.
Hi there. Trying to turn my camera on. So I'm the executive director from Maple Broadband, and I want to thank you guys for this presentation. It's been great hearing, and haven't had the pleasure of working with either of your organizations, but it sounds like you're doing great work. So I just want to make a couple of quick comments. One is that, again, I really appreciate the discussion, and I hope that this is not the start and end of it, but that we continue to have these conversations as we go along, because the situation is changing all the time, and it is really important, as we've heard a couple of times, to make sure that we continue to get an update on the situation on the ground, and that the board has this information as well. And the other thing is, I really appreciated, I forget which of you shared it, but sharing the internal dashboard around where you are in terms of tracking the poll applications that are coming in, and where you are in terms of internal targets and those SLAs under the regulation. I think that would be a useful thing, and would probably be useful, if possible, to provide kind of a high-level dashboard at the state level of how things are going to the board. I think to Patty's point, so that you can actually see overall where things are going, under or according to target, and where there might be delays, and then what are the root causes of those delays, and what sort of risk mitigation could be done, right? So we've talked about things like materials and people and so on, but again, to your point, Patty, until we've clearly identified where the actual challenges may be as they come up, and then where are the areas of risk, it's really hard to be doing risk management. And so I think that's just the general commentary I'd like to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Anybody else from the CUDs that would like to just express an opinion or ask a question? Okay, hearing none.
I see David Jones and Roger Nishi.
I'm sorry. David, let's have you go first.
Okay, thank you. Very briefly, I agree with all the comments that have been made about the importance of the relationships between the CUDs and the electric utilities. We've been trying to observe, a good working relationship with our main utility, Green Mountain Power, and we're very appreciative to them for that. I think that we're all facing some marketplace constraints that need to be, in everyone's mind. The timeframes for getting things done, they can't get done as quickly as we might have expected, given recent historic experience, and they're costing. It's costing more than we would expect based on recent historic experience. So we are trying to manage those two elements, contrary to our original expectations, and we look forward to working closely with the board to jointly navigate our way through these marketplace issues. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Roger Nishi, you're up.
So
Muted.
there was someone brought up the issue of cross subsidization, and you can't have the ratepayers of the electric utilities paying for some of the costs that may be have to be incurred to get the poles ready. So what happens when the various utilities, pole-owning utilities, hit their budget or don't have the capacity to continue doing the make ready during the year? I mean, are there funds to help them continue doing the make ready? And maybe this was discussed earlier when I had to step away for a little bit. So if it has, we can just, I'll just catch up in the minutes later.
And thank you for the question, Roger. And I'll turn to that since I was the one who brought it up. We are largely pivoting to make ready and the associated work with it. So I don't think that'll be an issue for Washington Electric Co-op. And in terms of the budget, we will be able to do all of the work that we need to do on the electrical side to get the make ready done. Thank you.
Peter, do you want to add anything?
I'll hold my comments because I agree with Lewis that right now everything's peachy, but once we start getting, I think we're just in the ramp up mode right now, so I don't know what the steady state is going to be, and at that point, I think Roger's comments may bear more weight because again, once we reach that 500 miles and we're at maximum capacity, because I think, Rob, this is also to you as well. One of the things that newer CUDs have to understand is it's not just, the contractors that are putting poles in the ground or even stringing the fiber. It's even utility designers just to design, if you have to replace a pole, you have to redesign a pole. It doesn't take all that long, but if you add thousands of poles to an already busy schedule, I mean, we actually have a utility designer that's on contract from Davie Resource Group that's just focusing on make ready. And we only have 200 miles. So it may actually take two of those contractors in order to get that done. So I think the jury is still out on this one. And that's why I just wanted to hold back my comments until maybe the next time we meet and we see more of an influx of make ready, but we haven't gotten to the point where, we're starting to push back on timeframes yet.
Yeah, that's consistent with GMP as well. GMP's, I would say, Peter, reflected GMP's concerns as well. They do feel like they're keeping up, just as WEC has said. But, this is the whole message from this whole meeting is pretty consistent. We've got to coordinate at the district level, coordinate with the VCBB, make sure that we're, staff, VCB staff, we're totally in sync with this. So, I do like the suggestion of developing a dashboard that Ellie made, and I wrote that down. We will follow up on that.
And just in the short time that I've been here, I've learned that if what I say sounds like it contradicts Peter Rossi, I'll amend it. So I'll do that here and say I was referring specifically to the budgetary implications, not capacity of staff or materials. That may well be an issue, just the budgetary side. Thanks.
Yeah, you make a good point, Roger. And the woman that spoke before, and I think it dovetails with what Roger just said. I think the concern is risk mitigation, not current status. And I think it's because there's so much turmoil in the markets. There's turmoil, globally with wars and conflict and all that stuff that's all affecting the supply chain. There's a lot more unknowns now than there was even 12 months ago when we were prepping for a lot of these projects. And I think that's where, our efforts should probably be focused more is on what are we doing, plan B, plan C, plan D, that kind of thing, and go down a couple of levels for risk mitigation. I think that's the general theme that I'm hearing.
Okay, we want to thank everybody for participating today. It's 2:15 and we still have quite a bit left in the agenda to navigate through, and want to thank Dave and Lewis from WEC. Thank you very much. It's great seeing you both. Peter, thank you. And just everyone keep collaborating, keep talking. We'll get this done.
See you guys. Dan, I'll give you a call offline and talk about that. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda. Let me get my agenda back up.
Yeah, I
Christine,
think
are
we're
we ready to do
Yeah.
3 new staff intro?
Yeah, ready to do staff intro, and then we can go to workforce development plan. I'll
Okay.
present that.
Let's,
So
meet our
anyway,
next-
it's with excitement that I want to introduce Lucy Rogers. Lucy, if you can, Rob, if you could spotlight Lucy. We're really pleased to have Lucy join us. Of course, Lucy was a legislative rep from Lamoille County, a lot of experience, highly respected in the state. And all I can say is thank you, Lucy, for joining us. But also, Lucy had a new baby cow, and I think Rob's going to show the picture of that baby cow. She had to step out of the meeting for the cow. So there it is. Look at that cute little cow. I just saw.
Wait, I don't see it.
Where'd it go, Rob? I saw it briefly. How was the delivery, Lucy? I don't know if Lucy can
I
hear
think it went well.
Oh.
I went up at 7 a.m. and it was all over. So I assume it went
Oh.
well.
It's great when things happen.
There
that
it is. Look at that.
Nice. And what is the breed of the cow?
Oh, there, I see. The mother is a Guernsey, and then the calf is a Guernsey Jersey cross.
Very nice.
And you're gonna
I know
call
that.
it Freddie Fiber, or
Open to naming suggestions, but it has to start with an S because that's the lineage of the cow.
Excellent. Very cool.
So tying this back to our work focus, immediately drafted Lucy and Alyssa into the workforce equity team. As the board is likely aware, we had a $518,000 planning grant. Our clock is ticking. We have 11 months in order to resubmit a plan. The equity planning grant is a precursor to getting our BEAD infrastructure grant. So even though we don't have our digital equity officer at this point, we're going to start with the three of us, Alyssa, Lucy, and I, to start working on that plan. And Lucy is going to be our liaison to the CUDs. So Lucy, if you want to say a few words, I don't know if you've got anything in mind to say, but don't feel pressured. So.
No, just really excited to be working with the VCBB. I have been, in addition to being a legislator, I've been involved in the Lamoille FiberNet CUD. The last couple years, I was a founding member, helped to get it off the ground, and then have been a board member up until taking this new job. So looking forward to kind of taking that work and looking with a more statewide lens.
Great. Lucy, are you still a state representative?
I technically am, but I did not run for re-election, so
Okay.
I will be leaving the position shortly.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. What committees were you on when you were in the hot
I
seat?
started on healthcare, but when I was on healthcare, I spent most of my time working on broadband issues. So I ended up I was there for 2 legislative terms. In my second term, I was on energy and technology.
Oh, great. Excellent. Excellent. Well, welcome aboard.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Thanks.
Excited to have you.
Okay.
Okay.
I will share my screen and what we're going to, this is the culmination. You have a copy of the workforce development plan. What I'm going to do is a presentation, which is a summary, which is in that plan. We're planning on a press release this week announcing the plan. It's been the culmination of many months of work with some very wonderful participants, which I'll get into that. I don't know what just happened here, please. But there it is. Okay, can you see that presentation?
Yes.
Okay. So if you look at our challenge here, the shortage of telecom workers existed even before COVID. Early on last year, I met with the VP of Consolidated, and they had 30 openings at the time. This is even before we started, right? And it's been an ongoing problem, telecom workers. We estimate we're going to need more than 200 technicians to meet the 5-year build out. And that's only tells really half the story because the turnover rates in the industry are high. They're averaging 55%. This is from the U.S. DOL database, Department of Labor database. And some of, you know, some of the, I've talked, I'll get into the process we're going here, but I've talked to different construction contractors, and they've got this whole thing going on with piece pay, which apparently is, you know, quite prevalent in the industry. Of course, you know, it makes a lot of sense to me. You know, I started out in manufacturing, we eliminated piece pay early on. Piece pay means you get paid for the amount of work you do. So adding an apprentice to somebody who's getting piece pay, you know, it slows them down so they don't get paid as much. Cleaning up the work site slows you down. You know, you get, adhering to safety rules slows you down. So I don't know whether we can do anything about piece pay, but certainly going to continue to work with the providers to address how we can reduce the turnover. And, you know, of course, you look at Vermont, we have a low unemployment rate. So adds to the problem. And the industry's young. You know, one of the things about the problem with that is it's hard to find trainers. You know, we really are reaching out. You know, the Communication Workers of America has made some commitments to get some for us, but we'll see. And the pressure on the workforce is going, of course, to increasing as a result of federal dollars. Vermont is ahead of the rest of the nation in terms of construction. And as the rest of the nation comes up with these dollars, this problem will get worse before it gets better. So if you look at the team, it's been a great team. I'm so happy, and I want to thank everybody, you know, publicly who's been on this team. We started meeting in May. We've been meeting pretty much weekly, and this workforce plan is really the product of this team. So you can see that majority of the CUDs have been involved. We've had Pat Moulton from Vermont State College, Sarah Ballou from Vermont Technical College. So this has been the core team. So what you see is a product of this brain group. So outreach, the outreach we're doing, and we're in the middle of that right now, is telecom providers, construction companies. We've reached out to industry associations, trade groups, Fiber Broadband Association, Fiber Optic Association, and others, municipal organization, vocational nonprofits, CWA, IBEW. But the process oversight is provided by the reps from the Communication Union District, the Department of Labor, Vermont Technical Colleges. Now the Agency of Commerce and Community Development is also involved as of last week. And initial meetings have been held with Vermont Works for Women and the Vermont Business Roundtable. So those relationships that I've identified at the end there are evolving. In fact, as I was presenting talk during this board meeting, I got a note from follow-up from Vermont Works for Women. So we're reaching out to everybody we can think of. So what are our goals? We want to facilitate the establishment and the scaling of education training programs. If you look at these apprenticeship programs, you know, we're not just focused on the fiber technicians. I want to give a real kudo. I met with Syracuse Utilities last week. You know, they're saying you got to focus on the whole supply chain. Flaggers are important. So having trained flaggers, Syracuse Utilities hires their own flaggers because that's the basis of getting the job done is controlling the traffic. So whether it's the flaggers, the right-of-way clearing folks, the people that loggers are clearing the right-of-way, we really ultimate goal would be to get certification on all these areas. But we're starting with we're doing the triage, starting with the fiber technicians first. We want to provide Vermonters with opportunities for better paying jobs. We want to provide job and career opportunities for the marginally employed or the marginally employable as well. The bottom line is we got to get every able-bodied person working we can. We want to create career paths, and we also want to help improve employee retention. So if you look at the outreach focus, which we're now on through December, you know, we're looking at what are your existing workforce openings, what are your turnover rates, and the reason behind those turnover rates. Thinking about future workforce needs, talking about the build plans, and we're talking about a regional approach here, which we can tap into contractors anywhere from New York State to Maine. Training and apprenticeship programs, this whole list. This is the entire list we're trying to get. This big one I talked before. How is it easier to make smaller employees get trainees ready for work and not take away from existing productivity? So those include prison programs, attracting workers from out of state, possible immigration. I have reached out to Canada, but I would say immigration would be a last resort. Centralized resource for sourcing workers. We talked to the CWA and the IBW about that. And of course, housing support. We haven't yet cracked that nut. So here's the timeline. In Q4, we're going to collect information from industry partners, finalize training core curriculum, start developing a pay it forward program, create an industry. We want an industry, 2 separate advisory boards, an industry advisory board and a training advisory board. Start working with Vermont's career technical education program, develop success measures, finalize career path programs with agency partners. For example, we reached out to Vermont Energy Investment Corporation, Efficiency Vermont, to say, hey, can we build a career path that starts with a fiber tech, could possibly move into smart grid or solar installation and other things. And then, of course, source funded deployed training resources that's ongoing, but we've certainly last week had a meeting with ACCD, Agency of Commerce and Community Development, Vermont Department of Labor, and there are additional training resources. The Vermont State College System has a $535,000 grant from the legislature. Pat Moulton's heading that up. We're working closely with her. That's strictly training for fiber technicians, earn to learn program, paying people to get educated. Q1 of next year, we want to finalize this pay it forward program, further develop curriculum for targeted professions, focus on this pay it forward program, get the CET program further along, formalize career path partnerships with the partners. The initial meetings have been good with the construction partners. The idea is, look, if you can bring people in that don't get in bar fights, show up to work and can work in the air, you've taken away three quarters of our problem. So we're gonna work on doing that. And then I start to look at some management training programs with industry partners as well. Q2 of next year to Q3, kind of get into the middle of the year, implement the pay it forward program. Make sure we're in program delivery at that time. Finalize agreements with the partners, implement reporting, and recruit and train. So that's essentially a high-level summary of the workforce development plan. At this point, I'm happy to take any questions.
Christine, are you working with any of the contractors with this? Because, I mean, these are all great efforts, and this is a really tough nut to crack. This is, incredibly difficult to increase workforce. This is a really lofty goal to achieve, and it strikes me that the actual contractors that hire, Northline, Eustis, those guys that are actually doing the hiring, are you in touch with them?
Yeah, that's the slide right here. That's what we're doing right now, is personally making contact with everybody on the list to address these questions.
And what are they saying in terms of reality? Because this is a very difficult hill to climb.
Well, it's across the board.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk badly about any of the contractors, but
of course, I'm not asking. Yeah.
Yeah. Certainly, on the positive side, I'll highlight Syracuse Utilities. They're very interested, and they already work these programs in Syracuse, New York, with Oneonta. He sent me these contacts, so they're already on top of this. Others we have to. I hope we can coach them along and provide the help where they need the help. We're not here to put requirements in place. We're here to try to figure out how to raise the bar for everybody.
Right. And are they responding to any financial incentives that we can send their way? I mean, the reality is we want these local contractors to say, hey, there's money to be had, or there's help to be had from the state. Let's go hire and train people and put programs together, because it's the contractors that really are going to make this happen. And I'm just curious as to.
Yeah. And so you know, money doesn't necessarily solve this problem at this point. And I've just started having these meetings, and I've got an important meeting tomorrow. I won't say who the contractor is. But, you know, it's, I go back to that piece pay issue, you know, this, you know, it's, you know, if we've got a situation where, you know, we had these ideals to develop this 2,000-hour apprenticeship program, and it looks like we're going to have to modify that because, so originally we were thinking, when we went into this, we were thinking we could, okay, let's just provide 144 hours of classroom training. And what we, and as soon as we started outreach with the, with those folks you're talking about, the contractors, they said, look, that's not going to do it for us. You know, you got to make, you got to filter out the people that are I'll use that quote again, people in bar fights, those people that can work from heights. So we, you know, we have, you know, there's actually one contractor I talked about that had essentially a 300% turnover in the first 9 months. So, you know, what can we do to help? That's the big issue for the contractors. What can you do to help to reduce our turnover rates and help us? That's the real big expense here.
All right, Laura has her hand up. Laura, you're on.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna kind of piggyback on what Patty is saying, and I will say generally, Christine, so this is not specific to this program. I am really having a hard time subscribing to workforce training programs, particularly for temporary staff. The success of those, so not specific to VCBB, and I'm seeing this everywhere in all kinds of sectors. And, you know, I just wonder if, I mean, the problem is we don't have bodies, you know,
Right.
So, you know, it's not necessarily we have bodies that aren't trained. We don't have bodies. And so, you know, and this is a temporary workforce. And, you know, it seems to me that there's one way to get bodies here quick, and that's money. And, you know, just talking to, as Patty was, and I hear you say that you're going there next to the contractors and employers. I mean, that to me seems like, you know, how that seems like a place to be pretty successful. And I definitely would be saying, Eustace, what's it going to take for you to get 20, not Eustace, I'm going to say Eustace, but not Eustace. Okay. So what's it going to take for you to get, you know, 30 more workers available next year?
Exactly.
Because they know. And if they're not willing, if they're not willing to engage, I don't know if that's what you were saying, that some contractors aren't willing to engage. I wasn't sure if you were saying that or not, but that's problematic. So.
Yeah, I mean, Christine, in general, you could spend, this is the trades, this is like the whole trades industry. And you can spend a lot of staff time chasing this and get nowhere. And I'm just going to encourage you, talk directly with contractors, see what will crack the nut on their end and their, in particular, their individual situations to bring more people on, and have those conversations, because it's all across the trades trying to attract more people to come in. And most of the time it does turn into a salary. A salary number is what will attract people to come.
Patty, if I might, I would just, so to add even more clarity, like in talking with these folks, I would not be asking them, you know, what types of workers do you need? I would literally be asking them, how could you, you know, if you wanted to hire, what would it take for you to be able to hire 20 more people and try and solve that problem? That's my comment. And now I will.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, Christine.
You're welcome.
Agenda. Have we covered everything 1 through 8?
Yes, we have.
Okay.
We're at VCUDA update.
All right, 2:30, right on time. VCUDA update. Rob, we will turn it over to you.
Great. Well, first of all, in regards to the issue earlier today, we did the impossible. We got 8 out of 9 positive votes in favor of NEK's grant and 1 silence. So when they get to it, I won't be surprised if it's a very strong support. So folks are really excited for that, and appreciate also Rob Fish sending along the allocation by road miles. That helps kind of justify. So hopefully we can take that off the thing. I think our update today is pretty short. You know, in the 2 weeks since we've met, the biggest thing that the VCUDA team has been working on, there's lots going on, but the ones I'll highlight for you are a follow-up on our legislative and policy group discussion from last time. We met with Christine, Stan, and Rob after the last VCCB meeting and went through in some depth the whole brainstorming list of legislative policy and other ideas that came up in our internal brainstorming. I had a great, robust conversation about that. As a follow-up, the team has met, and actually Ray Pelletier has started to draft some language around the legislative initiatives that we are interested in this year. In particular, the language around acquisitions, and just let me say this out loud because the words may change over time. Acquisitions would be a CUD taking over another whole CUD. And mergers, in our vernacular, means a CUD might split up and go to adjacent CUDs. Neither of those refers to anything other than the public continuing to maintain through the town interests and the voting representations that are in place, CUD assets, but thinking about creating some flexibility over time if the town representatives decided there was efficiency in working together across borders. And so Ray's actually got a first draft of that. I think he sent it off to Stan, and look forward to starting some collaboration around that. I think there are a couple technical corrections around meeting dates and other things that will also get worked into it. But we've gotten started on the big piece around acquisitions and mergers as I described them. The last piece is we need to do a very simple technical correction around, or we would like to do a simple technical correction around including the CUD municipal staff in the municipal staff that qualify for the Vermont Municipal Employee Retirement System, VEMRS. And so we, again, are working on all that, and I think that's probably the stuff that kind of highlights the progress since we had our conversation with you last week. The last thing is I had a chance actually to meet a bunch of the VCBB staff in person and the expanded team, and really appreciate the time to get a chance to see people face to face and put faces to name and hear some stories, personal stories and stuff. So I think it was a great start to a discussion. Really appreciate that VCUDA was included, and I think that'll be the highlight of my report today, unless there are any questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rob. Any questions of Rob? Laura, your hand is up, but I'm not sure if it's from the prior discussion.
Legacy, sorry. Thanks, Rob.
Gotcha. All right. And I don't see any other hands, Rob. Thank you very much. And thank you for doing that straw poll on the NEK grant application for $400,000. And what I'd like to do is go off the agenda now and come back to that item. We had a motion on the table to approve the NEK grant for $400,000. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The ayes carry. Congratulations, Christine.
Thank you very
Krista, I
much,
should
Krista.
say.
Krista, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, Krista.
Nice.
Yes, and Christine, the item to follow up of VCUDA still stands relative to asking them specifically, do they support for that 1.5 million first come, first serve? Or do they want to see some sort of allocation relative to miles served?
Yep.
Percentage basis?
Yep, got it.
Excellent. All right,
Okay,
next on
public.
our agenda is public comment. Rob, do you want to run that for us?
Sure, I can do that. Is there any member of the public that has comment? Krista, again, go for it.
Hi, thanks. So I'm going to bring this up. I've brought it up with staff, but I just wanted to bring it up to the board because I can't really understate how complicated it is that we don't have a way to have a certificate of good standing as a CUD. And there are a lot of other states that apparently do certificates for municipalities and other types of organizations. And I would like us to consider approaching the Secretary of State to do the same thing for CUDs. I mean, it could be as simple as what we provided, and anytime we put in the request, we get the, the updated certificate. We have to go through it every time with various granting agencies, credit reports, vendors. It's just, it's an important part of being able to do business. And I did touch base with my contractor on the grant reporting about this. And so you might also speak with her since you're in touch with her about this subject. But please put it in your parking lot or do whatever, but please consider assisting this. I don't know that other CUDs have run into this as much, but they have at least started to run into it, and they will run into it more. I mean, right now we use our DBA trade registration and just as a way to have filled something in so we don't get disqualified, and then we just take the questions of why did you supply us this instead of a certificate of good standing. But at least it gets us to the question stage instead of the disqualification stage out of the gate. So just something to consider if you don't mind. Thanks.
Thank you, Krista. And I'm going to ask that we do add this to our parking lot. One is to explain exactly what it is, because I'm not even sure what the certificate of good standing means. And then what we would have to do to have CUDs get a certificate of good standing. Holly, you're on mute.
Hey, Krista. Have you brought this up to Vacuda, and have they added it to their legislative initiatives?
I guess it just felt like a state agency dealing with a state agency was more effective than a, oh, you mean, oh, to their legislative initiatives. Yeah, we can do it through, I didn't consider doing it through legislation. Sure. Yes, I will do that.
Cool beans.
Thank you. It's a good idea.
Okay, who's next, Rob?
Irv.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, can you hear me? Okay. I had a comment planned, and then I didn't comment during the Make Ready discussion, but I can't resist a mutual pat on the back with Brian. In the run-up to the PUC's revision of the Make Ready rules 3 years back, when Brian was Vice President for Operations at GMP and I was chair at EC Fiber, we had some very productive discussions and agreed on some joint positions to the PUC. And I think one of the most important things we did was add in 2 or 3 key places where the rules dealt with schedules and required timeframes that phrase unless otherwise agreed by the parties. And I think that has helped to encourage collaboration and forward planning between CUDs and utilities, or pole owners more generally, so that we aren't seeing each other as opposing parties, but collaborators. And Brian played a very large part in that. Now, back to the other comment I wanted to make. I really liked Christine's presentation of the simplified business model. And over on the right, you highlighted the effect on the necessary annual revenue average revenue per user based on the amount of debt load that a given CUD is carrying, or to what degree it's been financed from borrowing as opposed to grants. And I just want to point out that there is one CUD, the pioneer and the oldest CUD, which has demonstrated the validity of the CUD model. That's EC Fiber. But we have done it through borrowing. And we carry a large amount of debt right now. And I think going forward, we'll be wanting to discuss with the board ways to hoping to find ways to bring us closer to the same kind of balance that's being sought for the newer CUDs between grants and loans. Because otherwise, there's a significant penalty for being a pioneer. And that penalty falls on our customers. So I just wanted to put that in the hopper. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't
Holly,
see
your
any.
hand is,
Oops.
your hand is up, Holly. Okay. Anybody else for public comment?
Nope.
Okay, thank you very much. On to staff updates. Christine.
Sure. The highlight that I have is on Thursday, we have a meeting with the JITOC committee. What is Joint Information Technology and Operations Committee? What does that stand for, Rob?
Oversight, almost.
Oversight. Yeah. So anyway, it's a legislative committee. Apparently, the questions are going to be related to our middle mile application, and we're prepared for that. And so that's what I have for an update. Rob, you got anything to add?
Sure, I think that's going to be one of several topics, but what I have to add is we issued a press release about our most recent grants last week. We issued a press release a few minutes ago regarding the match program with quotes from the governor and VLCT. I've spoken with, I believe, almost every CUD in the last week. There's two I haven't reached. I'm happy to report that within the next month, we're going to have, well, the following CUDs will be constructing within the next month or so. We already have NEK Broadband, CV Fiber, Maple Broadband, Deerfield Valley, and I assume that EC Fiber is constructing too.
Okay,
So
excuse me, I'm interrupting. That is freaking awesome.
You scared me, Laura.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
it is
it's
awesome.
very exciting. It's very
Yeah.
exciting, and of how far that we've come. I also have heard that Southern Vermont, they may be complete by the middle of next year, not even the end of next year. Things may even move forward. So things are happening out there, everybody.
It's fabulous. Super.
Any other staff had any key points that we should have raised?
So on the agenda, Christine, we had dashboard review and parking lot.
Yeah, I think it hasn't changed any since last time. Alyssa's not here, so we won't be presenting that this time.
Okay.
There have been
I
no
think it would
changes
be
last.
fabulous to include in the board packet, like we did the last board packet, the one-page sheet of the dashboard.
Sure, we can do that.
Because that just, even if it's no change, because at every board meeting we have, we are forced to look at that, and that's fabulous.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.
So we'll move to the parking lot. Got a lot of things to add to the parking lot from today, so I've got all those noted, and we'll follow up with that. But here's first, let me share my screen. Can you better zoom this in?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so this VCBB approach to mapping a strategy for challenging the FCC. The fabric map, the PSD is the date for October 31st is really the PSD to challenge the fabric map. we've got to wait to see. We really shouldn't put a plan in place until we see what the map comes back at for the FCC. This should be on there, but I think we need to bump this to probably January before the FCC map comes out. We met with the PSD, and it looks like it's hard to say what's going to happen at this point. There were a number. The FCC maps vary. You know, I'm not going to say we're bad or anything, but there was such a huge difference between the state map and the FCC map that we've got a lot of work to do. The PSD has taken that initial effort to start that conversation. We also needed a federal program officer to work through this with. That federal program officer was announced. That's actually Clay Purvis, he's going to be representing the state of Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont to the NTIA. And we're going to be working closely with him on this mapping issue. So we're really happy he took that job.
Excellent. Laura, if you have a question, do you want to jump in or do you want to wait?
Yeah, I had a question around the mapping, Christine, and if you could just further kind of clarify what the difference between the FCC and the state map. So is the FCC showing a lot more coverage than the state?
It's showing we have addresses that they don't have. They have addresses that we don't have. Rob, do you remember what the data was on the differences? Do you have that in front of you?
Just looking for it. Give me 30 seconds. Sorry.
Yeah, there was a big difference. There's like 32,000 addresses off or something like that total.
Yeah, so I'm wondering who is saying more people are covered?
I don't know if we know the answer to that.
Just to be, this is only
Rob, we can't hear you. Rob, can't hear you.
Thank you. So this first challenge process is only whether there is a serviceable location. It's not whether there is service present at that location. That comes a little bit down, but even this initial problem, this initial map is frankly a mess. It's according to what's being submitted today, there's 69,304 locations missing from their map. There's also an additional 25,814 locations that are wrong or fictitious.
So Rob, can you just clarify that a little bit more for me? So are those FCC numbers?
No, these are yes, this is what is in the fabric the FCC is using. This is in the CostQuest database, the map that they created of locations that could potentially be served. When comparing that with our state mapping effort, there are over 69,000 locations missing from the database, and then there's 25,814 locations that are in that database that are wrong or don't exist.
Okay, that is a big problem. Thank you for clarifying.
Yes, that's our, thanks for summarizing that, Rob. It kind of does give you the scope of our problem.
No problem. And thank you for the Public Service Department of switching things around to get that challenge in today. Everybody should know the new broadband availability maps, the state maps, should be out in the next few days or week.
You're on mute.
So I think it's important that we report to the board regularly on this, but
could we actually have a little bit more clarification? Because I understood that the core of the FCC mapping problem was that they were using what are they called? They use them in
self-reporting data or something. Yeah.
No. It's a mapping problem itself. It's like tax districts, but that's not the right phrase.
Oh, you're thinking, yeah.
You use them in RDOF, for example.
That's census blocks.
Census blocks. Thank you so much. Brain freeze. So Rob, is the core of the difference the census block issue? Or are you saying that the FCC has actually gone out and tried to identify all the locations in Vermont, like somehow?
Okay, let me back up. You're right. The original FCC data, they even admit was garbage because it was based on census blocks. There was legislation to improve the mapping that was to be done location by location. the FCC hired a company called CostQuest to determine every serviceable location in the country. They used a combination of everything from tax maps to satellite photos, you name it, to try to come up with a list of all the locations. Well, they've come up a little bit short, is what the consensus we're hearing around the country is, and that's where those numbers came from, as terms of what the Public Service Department has identified so far in how their data is different than the data that we're reporting, which is based on the E911 maps. So we'll be challenging the location data. The next step will be, when we see where they say there's service available, of challenging that where we find major discrepancies. Does that help a little bit?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next one, we presented that compliance recommendation memo and overview of the process today. So we'll be calling that one complete. Invite to the federal delegation.
Wait a minute. There was some to-dos on that, right? So you provided the memo, but you're going to provide what your framework is for other kinds of compliance review, and you are going to provide the form of grant award so that we understand what the compliance requirements are in the grant awards.
Yep. That's one of the
Okay.
new action items I've written down.
I
That will-
see.
Yeah, that will be on there. Yes. In fact, I've probably taken notes on at least half a dozen more items to go on here today. So make sure to get that on for the next board meeting, and we'll update this. Invite the future delegation, the federal delegation, future board meeting. We're going to do that. We're waiting till after the election.
Mhm.
We scheduled a workshop for CODs for December 7th. And then the policy to address issue of enforceability with any of the partners in the CODs. That one seems like, I'm going to need clarification on that one, because I think we've already approved the grants. So, you know, that enforceability issue, I think, was addressed with every grant that came up. So I'm gonna actually, I'll throw that out there and call this one complete.
This is actually what I'm talking about that I had asked for before. It's
Yeah,
like we as a board don't understand what the enforceability measures are. So I'm not sure that I'm.
Well, they vary with each grant application. So, you know.
Well, why would that be true?
Well, because that's how we set it up. You know, we initially approved the Bolton grant application without any really caveats. So with each grant application, this has become it's varied depending on. When we got to the Southern Vermont one, this is where this issue really came up.
But Christine, this is exactly what I mean, Patty. This is up to the board whether the board's interested in this. But I thought it would be important for us to look at where the grant requirements are and how they work, and if it requires a discussion of each grant CUD by CUD, I guess that's a statement all by itself. But I don't think I'm asking you to do it now, Christine. I'm just saying that's
well, we're not. It's not clear to us what you're even asking for here. So if you're asking, so again, we've made commitments that we're going to provide you the grant applications in this meeting. We said we would do that.
Yeah.
I don't see that tying to this one or the other one. It's a new action item.
Yeah, I guess I'm wrong, because this is about enforceability with any of the partners of the CUDs. And what the issue was here, and this was a Laura item, it's like, it's fine that we have a grant agreement with, for example, Maple, but what does that mean if the grant is not in compliance due to the actions of Waitsfield Champlain Valley Telecom? So there was sort of a, what do we do to get underneath the grant agreement? As a lawyer, I'm thinking I understand what the answer to this question is, but I don't want to be presumptive of it. But that's what I thought it meant, is like, how do we enforce below the grant contract?
Yes.
Okay. That's a, I think I get it. But let me shut my screen off and talk about this. So, this, it only gets back to the presentation we did today. What I think the board deserves, I'll say it that way, is, we really need to put a policy in place, and we can come back to you with this. Policy is like, and so this question we've been exercising at staff. What are the steps? What are the steps to understanding? First of all, we want to have our dashboard. We want to know when problems are starting to occur, and then we want to have a corrective action plan, and ultimately in place. What do we do if people default on that corrective action plan? And I think I'm going to ask. I don't know if it'd be unfair, Stan, to ask you to jump in here or not. If it's unfair, we can come back as staff and come back to the board. But that's kind of a summary. That's what I would come back to you with. Does that? I'm speaking to you specifically, Holly, because they're having this conversation. Am I thinking the right way?
Well, let's ask Laura if, for example, because I believe this was her question. But I think, I don't know if you remember it.
Yeah, I'm not sure that this was my question or not, but I definitely had questions about enforcement, and specifically with Southern Vermont, and as we're going forward with other entities that that we've made that kind of a floor of, accountability and conditions. I think, yeah, how do we enforce? I think it's a good.
Well, I guess my answer,
and
Laura,
this is,
go ahead. That's Stan.
I just want to jump in and say that we, as a board, the VCBB does not have enforcement powers. Act 71 does not grant the board any enforcement powers. It's a granting agency, and so any powers we have are based on our granting or our ability to claw back money that we've granted. We can't sanction, we can't call a firm in front of us for not doing something other than the power of the purse.
That's an answer. So